It's 9 o'clock, and I'd like to call the meeting to order. Invocation will be by Pastor Ray Sent, and the Pledge of Allegiance will be by Commissioner Sandra Bowden. Pastor Sent, you want us to remain seated? Pastor Sent, would you like us to remain?
Good morning, Honorable Board and
you want us to remain seated?
Community.
Did you want us to remain seated?
Huh? You didn't listen.
Please
You
rise.
didn't listen.
Well, you usually want us to remain seated.
Oh, well, you always usually say it, but that's all right. I'll hold it to 10 minutes today because you're standing.
You betcha.
Before I get started in this, here's a neat little thing that I ran across, and I think it's apropos. Rules for today. It's rules for our garden. First, you plant 3 rows of squash. Squash gossip, squash criticism, and squash indifference. Plant 3 rows of peas. The purity, the patience, the perseverance. Plant 6 rows of lettuce. Let us be unselfish and loyal. Let us be faithful to duty. Let us search the Scriptures. Let us not be weary in well-doing. Let us be obedient in all things, and let us love one another. And no garden is complete without turnips. Turnip for church, turnip for your civic meetings, turnip for studies, turn up with a smile even when things are difficult, and turn up with determination to do your best. I think that's a good garden. Once again, I go backwards thousands of years because it's appropriate. It tells us that these proverbs are for attaining wisdom and discipline and understanding the words, for insight, for acquiring a disciplined and prudent life, and doing what is right, just, and fair. Let the wise listen and add to their learning, and let the discerning get guidance. And the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom. And a few more here. Commit to the Lord whatever you do, and your plans will succeed. No doubt about that. And then further on it tells us, speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute. Speak up and judge fairly. Defend the rights of the poor and the needy. And one more here on the page that tells us, he who rebels against authority is rebelling against what God has instituted. Therefore, it's necessary to submit to the authorities, not only because of possible punishment, but because of conscience. And with that, hear us, Lord, as we come to you in prayer. Lord God, you've done it again. You've blessed us with another beautiful Florida day. We're without doubt the most blessed of your nations. We care for one another, and this nation is one in which there is an unprecedented portion of our population engaged in volunteering to help those in need. You, O God, you do not appoint the qualified, but you qualify the chosen. Please grant that our leadership will partake of the opportunities you've afforded them as they act out their role in helping this community to continue to prosper as we enjoy our status as citizens, both in work, recreation, and all of the responsibilities that we go toward one another in this great land. Again, our county commission is going to be carrying out their duties as representatives of us all, and we would ask that this county, to the best of their ability, will be 130,000 citizens that will, as they are affected by these collective actions, be satisfied. Now, as our leaders put their respective faculties into action, give them an earnest desire to set aside personal and political agenda. Lord, let them act in the best interest of all concerned in the issues at hand. Imbue them with honesty, wisdom, cheerful demeanor, thereby setting an example for all who may come this day to be heard. We are gathered as necessary on matters concerning health, safety, welfare, and NIMBY is always present, but Lord, let it be set aside. Help these elected and appointed persons to successfully moderate today's meeting so that we may all leave feeling satisfied that we have been heard. As proclamations are given on this day, let us all be proud of the people who have volunteered their services on behalf of the citizens of our county to the betterment of everyone, that we, O Lord, who are blessed to reside, work, or play here, may be the ones to say thank you. Amen. Amen.
Amen.
Please join me in the pledge.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Under item 5, proclamations, I have a proclamation designating May 29th as Memorial Day. And we have Larry Wapnick, who is the President of the Veterans Council, Ray Sent, who is the Vice President of the Veterans Council, and Joe Martirana, Public Relations Officer. Would you like to come to the podium while I read this? Whereas Memorial Day was first observed on May 30th, 1868, when flowers were placed on the graves of Union and Confederate soldiers at Arlington National Cemetery. And whereas on Memorial Day, we pause collectively for a moment of reverence, reflecting on the heroics of those who answered when called by their country to bear arms and to protect and preserve the ideals of democracy. And whereas Memorial Day is a cherished tradition in our nation, and its observance helps us appreciate our history, our values, and our responsibilities by reminding us that freedom is not free. And whereas the Veterans Council of Indian River County, consisting of over 20 veteran organizations representing over 18,000 veterans residing in the county, is holding Memorial Day ceremonies at Veterans Memorial Island Sanctuary on Monday, May 29, 2006. Now therefore be it proclaimed by the Board of County Commissioners of Indian River County that May 29, 2006 be designated as Memorial Day, and the Board urges all its residents to attend Memorial Day ceremonies at Veterans Memorial Island Sanctuary at 9 a.m. on Monday, May 29th, and of course signed by all of the county commissioners. Mr. Wapnick?
Thank you, Chairman Newberger, and I would like to thank the rest of the county commissioners. I would also like to thank the county, and I would also like to invite everyone to our ceremony, May 29th, Monday, at 9 a.m. This year, we're starting an hour earlier. We will have a most wonderful ceremony, and we will have, it'll be loaded with poetry and music. It'll bring everyone back, especially our World War II veterans, to the days when they themselves were in the field or in the service of our country. I would advise those from the public who are coming to please bring either a lawn chair or a chair, because I know we do expect a very large crowd. Our keynote speaker will be the Chief Financial Officer of the state of Florida, Tom Gallagher, and he will be introduced by our State Senator, Mike Herodopoulos. And I know that we will also have many of the County Commission people, as well as the City Council people. We, the Veterans Council, are more or less in a very unique situation. The city has given us the Memorial Island Sanctuary as a showcase to do all of our ceremonies. So we have a wonderful partnership there. And the county supports the Veterans Council on our veterans transportation. And in my estimation, I don't think that there is a better combination of services for our veterans anywhere in this country. And this county also has tremendous love for our veterans. And it's just a pleasure to live here. We are also going to present the island now as an historical landmark. And there will be a special service within our service commemorating this. So please, everybody come. We want to see all of you here also. And I'd like to now introduce Joe Martirana, who will tell you about Memorial Day.
Good morning, Chairman and members of the Board of Commissioners and the ladies included and the staff. You have seen me here on other occasions, but today my role here is not to tell you what's going on in our county on Memorial Day, but kind of remind ourselves of what Memorial Day is all about. I heard the proclamation, it tells it all, but I just got to tell you what I, as a World War II veteran, sharing that generation with guys who are now in the 80s, early, mid, and late 80s, what some of us do to remind ourselves. Since 1946, I guess that's 60 years ago when I first got out, joining the American Legion and other veteran organizations, this is the day of remembrance for us and all of us. We celebrate a half a dozen, call it historic patriotic observances during the course of the year. Some we celebrate because we became veterans and made it back. But this is a special day when we pay tribute and we remember those who did not make it back. And some of us go to cemeteries. We are fortunate we have Memorial Island Sanctuary. And I'll tell you what I, wearing several hats as a member of different veteran organizations, what we do, the Italian-American war veterans. We're not Italians, we're Americans of Italian ancestry who served in the armed forces. And what we do at our national convention, which is held in August, after our proceedings, business meetings, we sit down for, call it our big dinner, the banquet. And prior to the opening of the banquet, we hold a moment of silence, because at that very moment, in two cemeteries in Italy, one at Anzio, south of Rome, and the other in Florence, we honor the thousands of Americans of all color, creed, nationality, who at that time were wearing the American flag, so to speak, projecting what we stand for, democracy and freedom. A lot of these boys fell. Some were lost at sea. And we have those two cemeteries as a reminder, and on that occasion we lay wreaths at each of the cemeteries. We are doing the same here in Indian River County. We're placing a wreath at the marker of Scott Owen. As we all know, Scott left here, Vero Beach, and was planning his 25th birthday within a few days, having written to his wife, "I'll see you shortly," and then the USS Cole was attacked. And he was one of the unfortunate, first missing and then found deceased, dead. Now, I bring you this little story because little known to us in our many agencies, and I'm not referring to the size of this, call it commission or county government, but in the federal bureaucracy, you know how many millions and millions of people are employed throughout. There is one small little agency called the American Battle Commission, some such title. It's an executive department agency, and it comes out with a booklet, which I will pass out. I have a limited number left. But in it, it tells the story of 24 national military cemeteries overseas, not here in the States, overseas, and 22 memorials and monuments throughout during World War II. As we know, the Atlantic Theater of Operation and the Asiatic Pacific Theater of Operations. How many know that we have 125,000 buried in these on these foreign soils, as well as almost 100,000 that were lost, missing in action overseas or not found. And their names appear individually on tablets throughout the world as having been Americans serving their country and lost in battle on land or in a sea. So I am passing these out. Unfortunately, I only have about a dozen left or 10, and when I get more, I'll bring them into the staff to pass out to those who are interested. It's it's an education, and I'll close with this thought. As we, our generation, and the Korean, Vietnam, and those coming back from Afghanistan and Iraq, we remind ourselves almost automatically. But what is so gratifying, and all of you I know have attended, whether you're speakers or not, that every year we are finding more and more of the younger generation coming with their young parents who didn't serve to these, call it, observances. And that perhaps is the most gratifying thing of all to me, that not only we as veterans remember those who didn't make it back, but the new and younger generation are now being told our history. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ray Sant,
Mark-
Veterans Council.
Shortest one I've ever said. Ghetto.
Well, thank you all. I have the proclamation, Larry.
Boy, is that a first.
Thank you, Joe.
Make sure Art gets
Thank you, Joe.
and you too, sir.
Thank you, Joe.
Very
You
nice.
too, my friend Mayor.
Hey.
Hey, once a mayor, always a mayor. I got two. Here, you can have one. Here.
Thank you, people of the Veterans Council, and we'll see you on Memorial Day, I'm sure. Thanks for coming. Presentation of proclamation designating May 28th to June 3rd, 2006 as Hurricane Awareness Week, and Vice Chairman Mr. Wheeler will read this one.
Elma, Salter, if you'd all three would like to come to the podium, you're welcome. And I'll read this proclamation and then present it to you. And this is a proclamation, as Chairman said, designating May 28th through June 3rd, 2006 as the Hurricane Awareness Week. Whereas Project HOPE, which stands for Helping Our People in Emergencies, is a crisis counseling team whose sole mission is to provide emotional support, hope, and guidance to the communities affected by natural disasters. And whereas Project HOPE's federal crisis counseling programs include an emergency response phase, which is 72 hours after the disaster, to immediate response phase, which can be up to 60 days, and long-term recovery, which can be up to 9 months. And whereas the primary goal of the crisis counselors is to assist disaster victims in coping with the psychological aftermath of disasters and to encourage linkage with other individuals and agencies for additional support. And from October 25th, 2005 to March 14th, 2006, Project HOPE served 4,245 Indian River County residents, including children, minorities, and the elderly. And whereas Project HOPE's hotline is available 24/7 to provide crisis referral services to callers who need support and assistance to cope with the impact of hurricanes, and has been providing these services to survivors of hurricanes Charlie, Francis, Ivan, and Jeannie. Now therefore be it proclaimed by the Board of County Commissioners of Indian River County, Florida, that the week of May 26th through June 3rd, 2006 be dedicated as Hurricane Awareness Week, and signed by all the commissioners. Thank you.
Thank you.
Would you like to
Good
say
morning. Once again, my name is Alma Salter. I'm here for Project HOPE. We'd like to say thank you to the county commissioners and the citizens of Indian River County for your support during the hurricane season. On June 3rd, we'll be hosting our Hurricane Awareness Grand Finale. It'll be from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. At 11:30, we'll have a First Responder Good Neighbor Award ceremony for thanking the first responders and good neighbors for their contributions and tireless efforts throughout the 2005 hurricane season. And we'd like to send an invitation to everyone here to participate. Also, May 29th through June 2nd, we'll be having Store Booth Day. We have something set up at Michael's Crafts and Oslo Diner, where you can go out and get information, those of you who are not familiar with the Project Hope organization. I'd like to introduce my team if possible.
May?
Okay. We have Denise Gomez, Betty Clarkson, Tatiana Berman, and Maria McCutcheon is our bilingual coordinator. We also deal with the Haitian, Mexican population here in Vero Beach. So we do have translators if anyone knows anyone that needs help. And once again, I'd just like to say thank you for having us today, and thanks for the proclamation.
Well, thank you for what you do.
Thank
You
you.
have the proclamation? Item 5C, presentation of proclamation honoring Ellen Haith on her retirement from Indian River County Board of County Commission. Ellen, would you take the podium while I read some of this? This is a proclamation honoring Ellen Haith on retirement from Indian River County Board of County Commissioners, Department of General Services. Whereas Ellen Haith is retiring from Indian River County effective May 31, 2006. Whereas Ellen has been employed with Indian River County since December 2nd, 1987, starting as a senior secretary in the Solid Waste Division. On September 30th, 1988, Ellen was reclassified to Secretary 2, which is the position she held until February 3rd, 1989, when she became an Administrative Assistant 2 for the General Services Department. Next, she became an Administrative Secretary 2 for General Services until March 30th, 2001, when she was reclassified as a Staff Assistant 4, a position she holds today. And whereas Ellen has served this county and the public with distinction and selflessness, and during her years of service, she was dedicated and her work was greatly appreciated by the employer and co-workers alike. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed by the Board of County Commissioners of Indian River County, Florida, that the Board applauds the efforts of Ellen on behalf of the county, and the Board wishes to express their appreciation for the dedicated service Ellen Haith has given to Indian River County for the last 18 years, and be it further proclaimed that the Board of County Commissioners and staff extend heartfelt wishes for success in her future endeavors. And that's not all. I have one more.
Okay.
You get two. This is to certify that Ellen Haith has hereby presented this retirement award for outstanding performance and faithful service to Indian River County Board of County Commissioners for 18 years of service. On this 23rd day, May 2006, this is signed by Tom Frame, who is your boss. I think he's back there somewhere, and myself. And I'd like to give these to you. You have to give us a few words. Speech. Have to give us a speech.
Should I get my book? Well, I want to thank all the commissioners, Mr. Chairman, Joe Baird, and of course my boss, Tom Frame. I thoroughly enjoyed working here. It's really been quite an experience. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Ellen. Good luck with that speech. We have a presentation by Beth McMillan, Marine Resource Council, regarding plans to extend the Indian River Lagoon Scenic Highway in Indian River County.
Good morning. My name is Beth McMillan. I'm the Assistant Director at the Marine Resources Council, and I help coordinate the Indian River Lagoon Scenic Highway. The Indian River Lagoon Scenic Highway currently is designated from on US 1 and A1A from Titusville to the Wabasso Causeway, including all the causeways along that distance. The goal of the designation is to protect, preserve, maintain, enhance the intrinsic resources of the corridor. These resources would be cultural, historical, archaeological, natural, and scenic. This designation provides for more funding for restoration, protection, things such as the historic Melbourne Beach Pier received funding to be remodeled in 2003, and we've also received money for a welcome center in Brevard County. Oops. Way back. Sorry about that. That's okay. Well, we're going to have to start over again. I'm sorry about that. That's all right. Currently, this is the current brochure for the the National Scenic Byway. state designation is the scenic highway, and then there's the federal designation of the National Scenic Byway, which the Indian River Lagoon Scenic Highway has been designated as both. The extension that we're proposing today would first go through the scenic highway status and then go on to the scenic byway status. And this is the Indian River Lagoon Welcome Center. It's in Palm Bay and sits on the Indian River Lagoon. Funding was provided from the designation from both the state and federal Department of Transportation, as well as the Florida Inland Navigation District. We're also working as part of this designation to get a welcome center in Sebastian with funding from this designation. And we have also coordinated an effort on invasive removal along the entire corridor. This management plan was put together for the corridor and is being provided to all of the municipalities and the counties along the corridor, as well as any assistance the Marine Resources Council can provide in removing Brazilian pepper, mostly along the shoreline in private lands, and everybody knows what the Brazilian pepper looks like. And that's the Brazilian pepper. Okay, from this map you can see the area in purple is the current designation of the scenic byway, and the area in pink would be the extensions. The blue area is the current designation in St. Lucie County of the Indian River Lagoon Scenic Highway Treasure Coast. By extending our corridor, we will be able to link up with the corridor in St. Lucie County. We would also like to extend the corridor out 512, and it would link up with the St. John's corridor that they're currently looking to designate, the American Heritage Corridor, out that way. And basically, what we're looking today is when we originally designated the corridor, we needed the support of all the municipalities along the corridor as well as the counties, and we're just looking for for you to be in support of us and to sign on to us providing this extension and making the designation.
You need that, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, we need it in some sort of a proclamation, a resolution, or what would you like?
Just a resolution that states that you're in support of this extension.
Super.
We can do that, then you can come back and we'll present it to you.
Okay, thank you.
Great.
Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
One item, Commissioner Davis would like to make some mention of the passing of Tom Adams.
Thank you. We had a tragedy in Indian River County last night. We had the Lieutenant Governor, Tom Adams, pass away in an automobile accident. Lieutenant Governor, to his last days, was certainly a leader in the community, helping to make this place a better place to be. Most notable, his final efforts were the incredible achievements that the Sebastian River NJROTC has had the opportunity to achieve. He did pass away in an automobile accident last night, and if we could, Mr. Chairman, I'm just requesting at this time a moment of silence in his honor.
That'd be perfectly fine.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Under item 6, approval of minutes, regular meeting of April 18th, 2006.
Move approval.
There's a motion.
Second.
And a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Consent agenda, item 7. Any items
Mr.
to
Chairman,
be
I'd like to
pulled?
pull item J, if I could.
J. Any others? Do we have a motion?
Move approval.
There's a motion to approve the consent agenda with the exception of item J. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item J, Tom?
This was, if y'all remember last week, this was the same item that we were talking about with the two lifts that we had talked about in reference to out at fleet maintenance. And I think in talking with Joe and looking into what we have out there, apparently we do have one lift that is capable, or actually the school board has on their side 5 or 6 lifts that are capable of lifting the fire trucks. Obviously, the only truck that we can't lift is the ladder truck, and that's understandable.
Yeah, they have 60,000-pound capacity, and we looked at adding the other lift with that capacity, and it's about a $150,000 lift. So at this time, we don't think we should do it because we have other options, but on the long run, we may look at it. But right now, we feel that we'll just stay with the smaller lift because we could use the school boards if we had to, and we have one lift that in our fleet management that we use for the dump trucks and the fire trucks.
Okay. With that, I have no problem with this item.
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and second to approve item J. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, motion carries. Nothing under constitutional laws of public items. We have a public hearing, Indian River County's request for special exception use approval to expand North County Water Treatment Plant.
Good morning, I'm Stan Bowling, County
Excuse me,
Planning
Stan,
Director.
if I may, Mr. Chairman, I believe this is a quasi-judicial matter.
Oh, you did remind me, yes.
You want
Under
to swear in
quasi-judicial,
with
we need to have anyone testifying to swear an oath. Anyone who wishes to speak in this item, would you please stand and raise your right hand, and the clerk will read the oath.
You swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Mr. Bowling.
I'll still say I'm Stan Bowling. It's still true.
true?
Still true. The request before you all this morning is special exception approval for a fairly minor building expansion for a water treatment plant facility. The plant, there's an existing plant on the site, and this is a proposed expansion. The site is located on the north side of 77th Street and on the west side of 58th Avenue. It is in the RS3 residential single family zoning district. The yellow that's indicated on this map shows that district, and that includes some properties to the south, an existing platted subdivision, as well as some vacant property that will be under development shortly. There are other surrounding properties that are county-owned that are shown in green, that are zoned agricultural, that are used for recreation purposes. From the aerial, again, you can see that the site is existing, and in fact, in 1993, the county granted special exception use approval for the facilities and an intentionally phased project. So quite a few facilities have already been built on the site, and it is operational. You can see there's a 55-foot tall water tower on the site. There are existing driveway and parking improvements, various facilities and piping, as well as a building that's on the site. And this approval is for expansion of one of the buildings that's not yet built but is proposed. I do also want to point out on the aerial, maybe a little bit difficult to see, but there is a 50-foot wide conservation area that is fully vegetated, understory canopy and ground cover, and that will remain. So there's a heavy buffer that will just remain in place on the north and on the west sides. I want to go now to the site plan itself to illustrate, turn that down just a little bit, to illustrate what is proposed on the site and what is existing. What is existing, again, are driveways and parking areas going into the site, as well as some stormwater areas. And there's an existing, in blue here, the existing water tower and building facilities. In the hashed orange is area that's already on the approved plan and can be built without any action by the board today, and that's in the cross-hatched area. That is a second water storage and a building addition. What is in the solid dark orange is actually the matter before you all this morning, and that is the expansion, approval to expand the building area by a little less than 4,000 square feet. Because it is a more than 10% expansion, they are coming through with special exception approval. So this has been before staff with the site plan, Planning and Zoning Commission, and is now before you all. There are several upgrades to the site that are being proposed, even though it's a fairly small expansion. Probably the most significant one is bringing up to code and actually exceeding our code on the buffers along 58th Avenue and 77th. Some of the turning radii into the existing driveways will also be enlarged to meet our current standards, so there are some upgrades with this project. There are specific land use criteria in the code for this type of use. This project meets all of those and actually exceeds the buffer requirements. The Planning and Zoning Commission voted 7-0 to approve the project, to recommend that you all approve the special exception use with two conditions. One of those conditions related to an odor control concern that was raised at the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. There was a gentleman at the meeting who lives across 77th Street in one of the residential areas. and he had some concerns about odor from the water treatment plant. Again, he lives along the south side of 77th Street. 77th Street is Sublateral Canal, and then he lives in this area here. That was one concern that the Planning and Zoning Commission wanted addressed. At that meeting, we took his name and phone number. The next day, utility staff contacted him and arranged and took him on a tour of the facility, showed him the odor control operations that they have and what was proposed with the new facilities. This gentleman was satisfied. In fact, before I could call him to verify that he was satisfied with the tour and so forth, he called me personally and let me know that he appreciated those efforts, and he now has a direct contact in utilities if an issue comes up. So we feel that that's been addressed. One of the other issues that came up at the Planning and Zoning Commission is the buffering along 58th Avenue and 77th Street. The code calls for a type C buffer along these roads, along 58th Avenue and along 77th. And what the Planning and Zoning Commission wanted to see was an upgraded buffer to a B, as in boy, and that is what is now proposed. The Planning and Zoning Commission also looked at, well, whether or not they could go all the way up to a type A buffer on this site, and there were some constraints to that. One of the constraints is security. There's a clear zone that has to be maintained because this is a public water facility plant. There has to be security and clearness between vegetation and some of the facilities in here. And there are also constraints underground. There are underground piping facilities around parts of the perimeter that constrain the buffer. So they were able to upgrade the buffer in line with the P&Z recommendation of a 20-foot wide type B, as in boy, buffer. But they're not able to widen that out and get a type A buffer. But they are, again, the code calls for a C. They've upgraded it to a B, and that is consistent with what the P&Z was looking for. Staff's recommendation is that the Board of County Commissioners approve the expansion with the condition that all of the buffer improvements be in place prior to completion of the project. I'd be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions of staff? If not, excuse me, we'll open a public hearing. Anyone from the public wish to be heard? Hearing none, I'll close the public hearing. Dr. Baker?
Thank you, Richard Baker, President of Audubon Society. I'm sure you're going to approve this thing, but I would hope that maybe you might think about the future, what it means, and maybe think about even tabling it. This is the beginning of a new program for the county. You're going to be doubling the water supply in the county, adding 6 new wells, and I think that's why you're expanding these buildings, is to accommodate the new wells that are being put into the county. And I think there are some concerns about the new water supply coming in, and I want to mention a few. Dr. David Troth, who's with the St. John's Water Management District, has come up with a couple of models with the water supply in Indian River County. In 2001, he suggested that the Floridan aquifer wells will cease to flow in Indian River County, St. Lucie border, as early as 2015, based on hydrogeological models. In 2005, he revised this prediction, saying that the Florida aquifer wells will continue to flow naturally in the border until 2025. However, it should be noted that during drought conditions, the natural artesian flow will be marginal. Furthermore, a drawdown of 19 feet will lower water levels to below land surface, and then may lead to vertical saltwater inconing or upconing in the Florida aquifer. Now, the modeling, of course, is quite controversial, and a white paper has been prepared for the county water management for the county utilities. But the fact is that the St. John's has issued, from going from 3 times watering your lawn 3 times down to 2. So there is, modeling aside, there is concern by the St. John's Water Management District whether we have enough water here, I would think, in Indian River County. I think you're also having a meeting with the Agriculture Advisory Committee on Thursday, and they're concerned about some issues
about pressure and salt intrusion. And I think you need to maybe wait and hear what they have to say before you would approve some of these. I mean, this is minor, I understand, but it's the beginning of the process. And I don't know why you'd want to start the process until you'd have a bunch of answers. I am concerned also about the brine that's being produced with these wells. I understand the county has come up with a plan. I've seen it actually and been out to look at the site at Spoonbill Marsh, where they're planning to put this brine from the artesian well. Now, already we have water, 3 wells, county wells, and some from the city coming in, and the brine and the surfactant material from the membranes is going into the river. And St. John's has told the county that this is not acceptable, and have asked them to come up with another program for it. The county has come up with the Spoonbill Marsh, and it's been reviewed. I went out there on a subcommittee, the Marsh Subcommittee that reviewed the program, and the committee as a whole were not enthusiastic about this. The plan has been sent to the Army Corps of Engineers and to NOAA, and NOAA, of course, is the National Marine Fisheries Division. And we heard about yesterday in today's paper about the hurricanes they're predicting. So you're talking about the feds. And both the Army Corps of Engineers, which I think have only disapproved 1 or 2 permits in the whole history of their existence, has concerns about this Spoonbill Marsh program. And NOAA itself said it's not satisfactory for the fish in the Indian River Lagoon. So for these reasons, and what was the other solution that you have for putting the brine? One is deep well injection. St. John's Water Management District is not recommending or is not allowing any more deep well injection, because they had a well in Brevard County which blew up and put this brine out where they don't want it, and so they put a ban on any future deep well injection techniques. And so I'm not sure what the county's proposal will be when they're going to be adding 6 new wells to the county. I guess they're drilling down very deep, putting strong turbine pumps down 100 foot. It's going to be pumping up a tremendous amount of water. What effect that will have on our agriculture, what we're going to do with the environment with the brine. I think these concerns ought to be addressed before we move ahead with promoting a expansion of the county water supply. Thank you.
We are going to go through all the regulatory agencies to get our permits. We always have and always will, and they'll look at this. So I think, let them look at it, and they'll either issue the permits or not. I think it's that simple.
Yeah, but I agree. And I don't know why we would spend money, though, before we get the permits.
We have to spend money to get the permits.
Yes, well, to expand.
That's life.
To expand the new building?
Yes.
You have to have a new building before you get a permit? Pardon?
It's part of the whole expansion project.
So we have to spend money up front to get you have to have the building there?
Yes, Dr. Baker. As far as the brine discharge, and I know Mr. Olson can speak more on this issue, we need to get a process in place to treat the brine discharge before we are given the permits to expand our water facilities. Eric, you want to add anything to the Spoonbill Marsh issue?
Yeah, for the record, Eric Olson, Director of Utilities. A couple of issues. First of all, I want to talk about the plant expansion in itself, just what exactly it's here for. Kind of looking at the plant expansion is really a function of we time expansions in terms of what has already taken place with respect to growth. We're not the carrot in front of the horse or anything like this. We have to kind of be like a business project, just-in-time delivery. The other thing that with respect to the project, it's interesting because this project, I want to clarify, is not paid for by taxes. It is paid for by impact fees previously paid. In other words, individuals that are here and have already paid their ticket are actually furnishing the funding for this particular project. With respect to the project itself, there is a question. Dr. Baker is correct. Dr. David Toth, St. John's River Water Management District, had done an earlier model. The model is a little bit, what I would say, different from what has already taken place. And in the process, it does, as Dr. Baker indicated, that we need to be wary future planning on this process. So what we did in utilities, we took a look at some earlier modeling situations that have already occurred in conjunction with Camp Dresser McKee and Misner and Associates. Basically, the modeling that both groups have done have basically concluded the same thing, and that is that in essence on this, one needs to be prepared and be wary, but the conclusion seems to show, rather than there being an imminent danger of what I would call a drying of the wells or a ceasing of the flow of the wells, they looked at this more from the standpoint of it does not seem to conclude that. But the thing that is important is that what we are doing is we're working very closely with the Soil and Water Conservation Group. We are testing artesian wells. We're going through the agriculture industry as we speak, basically to calibrate and confirm our data that confirms that there really is not an impending danger on this process of the well withdrawals. But one other thing I did want to talk about, Indian River County is really been proactive in a lot of ways. First of all, they made a decision early on to be a leader in terms of going to reverse osmosis. Reverse osmosis is basically the premier, the cutting-edge technology for water supply. 25 years ago, there were very few systems in the United States or in Florida that had reverse osmosis technology. When Indian River County decided to go into this process with the first south plant and then into the north plant, they did the right decision. So the water quality that you get is the best you can get. But one other thing that Indian River County has done, and that is to look in terms of our water with respect to the county's future. Wastewater, for example, every drop that we produce of wastewater is actually turned into a reuse component where we reuse it. Irrigation, wetlands reclamations. The same thing, we had a decision we could make with respect to the brine. The brine is a natural byproduct. I want to clarify, brine is simply a concentration of the material that basically is from, if you took seawater, concentrated it, you have concentrated seawater. That's in essence what you end up with. We had some choices. We could look at basically forcing the concept of going into deep well injection, but I think Dr. Baker is right on track. Deep well injection is a bit of a oxymoron. Why in the world would you want to be able to tell the public that you're looking to conserve water, create a future water supply, and yet you're throwing it away? So our goal has been to utilize brine, even though it's an offshoot or a byproduct of the water supply system. We're using it for irrigation by basically combining it with stormwater, and we're creating a reclamation project. Now, I will say one thing. We have been working very closely with all the regulatory agencies to the extent that the regional director of the Central District, Vivian Garfine, Christine Ferraro, we met personally on site week before last, met in my office to talk about the project from what it is. We have made modifications with respect to whatever restoration that would be required as a function of the project itself. The project design is designed to be almost a mirror image of the Environmental Learning Center. It's to be open to the public, boardwalks, set up to be in a position to show what can be done by a utility, by a government, to be in a position to reclaim a degraded area and modify it into a more usable area. So the bottom line is that Indian River County is aware of issues and concerns. We're working closely with the Soil and Water Conservation Group. We're going to be working closely with the Agricultural Group. The data appears to confirm from both modeling efforts, both by David Toth of St. John's and by CDM, it seems to conclude that there is no immediate concern. But we're going to take the extra step. We're going to calibrate our models. We're going to keep a close eye on this thing. We don't see a major impact on the short term on this process. But like anybody else, don't be sticking your head in the dirt and, not planning for the future. We are planning for the future. So if there's any specific questions, it is kind of one of those projects that it's not a phase that you get into. It's kind of one of those necessities of life. So we've got to expand the plant to meet the growth that's here. Not future growth, but the growth that's here.
Thank you, Eric.
So has the Spoonbill Marsh been approved then?
We're submitting the final permit today. We've met with Vivian Garfine. We've spoken to the environmental staff with DEP. We believe we've worked out what might be the final aspects of this, and our intent is if there's additional questions, we will work through that.
So you haven't gotten approval from NOAA or the Corps of Engineers then?
At this point right now, we're working through DEP. That's the regulatory agency in charge of it.
Because the brine from reverse osmosis is different than seawater, correct?
It is basically, yes.
And so the concern is putting this salt or brine plus the surfactant into the marsh, right?
Well, basically what we're trying to do is avoid throwing it away as a resource. What we're trying to do is reclaim a 62-acre area that's been degraded, and basically, since the early 1950s, is create a win-win out of the process. So the options are we can either throw it away or we can create a process that basically says let's reclaim a degraded area and create it into an environmental plus as opposed to an environmental negative.
I would disagree in the environmental negative part. When you're reconstructing this spoonbill marsh, you're putting in a lot of impoundments, making lots of runneling, putting in new ditches. That I think that is not improving the environment there.
Did you want us to do a deep well injection for it? I don't think you want that, do you?
Well, whatever it was, NOAA would agree with. Right now, the St. John's is not allowing it to occur because of the problems in putting it in. Otherwise, it probably is a good solution.
Well, I think the paradox is we can't check the box none of the above. That's the paradox. We can't check the box none of the above, so we've got an option. We can either do none of the above, or we can basically work through the process. If there are issues and concerns that DEP has, we'll work through those.
Is there any further comment from the public? Yes, sir. Don't go away, Eric.
I need to go over this.
Okay.
My name is Robert Adair, Vice Chairman, SWCD. The reason I came forward today is I'm not sure when you put the brakes on to try to figure out if you want to go forward with a plan. I don't know if it's at this stage or later. I serve on both committees that Dr. Baker referred to. I can tell you the SWCD has real concerns about the idea of drilling 6 new wells. These are, as I understand it, these are wells that will be done in 2 phases. We have currently 3 wells now, 3 additional wells, and then finally the last 3 for a total of 9. I think the most important thing to do today is to deal with facts. And the facts are that your South County well field already has reached its capacity without causing adverse problems to contiguous areas to the south of us in St. Lucie County. What I mean by that is South Florida Water Management District, which starts the dotted line at the south end of our county, has told our county they cannot increase any greater withdrawals than they are currently approved for. In other words, if you wanted to drill 3 more wells there, South Florida would object to that. Okay? The reason is because by increasing the withdrawal rates from those South County well fields, you would then adversely impact existing permitted users in St. Lucie County. To me, if that's true, then by increasing our capacity at the North County well field, which is in the St. Johns River Water Management District, you could cause adverse impact to existing permitted wells. Under Florida law, if the county or any other person who applies for a permit and is granted that permit, that new permit, if it's shown, adversely impacts in terms of flow or water quality, which would be salinity or TDS, then that person, the new permittee, has to provide water to the existing permit that was adversely impacted. And the problem, as I see it, is this is I-95, this is Highway 60, along here. And in red, right up in this area, are the existing permitted wells that are 6 inches in diameter or greater. Anything smaller than that is not permitted according to St. John's, a water management district. You've got 617 wells in that northeast corner of your county. A lot of those wells are outside, most of those wells are outside the urban service area. If you were to cause adverse impact to those wells, then the county would have to provide water to those rural users, those users outside the USA. In effect, you would be setting yourself up, possibly, if the salinity levels went up and those people couldn't use that water. Getting a pump in there, providing electricity to those wells is one thing, but you cannot change the quality of the water without doing an RO, which I admit is a great idea. The problem, as I see it, is that existing agricultural users outside this area that very likely could be adversely impacted would then not have any options to get water to irrigate their crops. Any landowners that are using that for domestic water supply would then become to the county for water solutions. Now, as far as I'm concerned, approving, and I'm not even sure what these buildings are for. We never heard what the purpose of the buildings were. If you want to stop and look at it right now, great. Before you put any money forward on it, I'm just saying, give the SWCD time to work with CDM, work with the utilities department, and we're looking at models. We've got two conflicting models. One model says one thing, one model says something else. Granted, David Toth himself, who I met, has given a talk, a scientific talk, admits that his model is much more conservative than the ones that CDM's using. He's saying, wouldn't you want to use the more conservative model when it comes to your water supply for your county 10 to 15 years down the road? What I'm here for today is to make sure that the county looks ahead 10 to 15 years, doesn't make a decision for a long-term water supply that's based on a model A there's some sort of conflict. Scientists go through this all the time. What's the next step? Monitoring. If you read your white paper that CDM has prepared, they're suggesting that they do the modeling after they drill the wells to see what the impact is. That's another thing you need to consider. You want to do the monitoring before you drill the wells, looking at existing well units with our existing 3 wells. We're in the middle of a drought right now. I can tell you from personal experience, the artesian pressure is down about 50%. And the problem is that when does the agricultural user need the water during a drought? You're going to be pumping continuously, granted, okay, and you're going to be irrigating twice a week your landscape plants, and all that's going to work out fine. The thing I'm concerned about is if artesian pressure ceases and the farmer cannot pump the water to his pumps, which are on the surface of the system, doesn't have access to electricity, he's using diesel-powered pumps, how are they going to get the water to irrigate their plants? And you go 7 days, 14 days, or longer, then you start losing the crop. Then you lose your ag, then you lose your green space, and you expand your urban service area. I hope you're following all this, the consequences I'm saying. I'm not a naysayer, I'm not a gloom and doom. I'm just telling you, scientifically, you've got 2 different models. They don't agree. You've got a situation in the South County where they're saying, hold the line, don't drill any more wells, but you're perfectly willing to go drill the wells up here. I would suggest that you hold on. If this is the right time to hold, then I suggest you do it now. If this is something that has nothing to do with drilling the wells and you want to go ahead and get your permits and deal with the spoonbill marsh, I'm not an expert on that. There are experts that are in this county that can tell you more about that. I'm thinking that possibly it might be a good idea to let some of the monitoring, where you actually look at potential effects with your existing 3 wells during a period of drought, how it works on wells that are within 3 miles of the North County well field. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to talk to them. I think it's a very serious issue. Obviously, we need the water, but I think we ought to be real careful about moving forward financially with our investments in the county, regardless of whether it comes from the impact fees, whether it comes from the taxpayers, and where you want to do this. And maybe somebody else can say, okay, fine, this is not the appropriate place to do it, but when they go to apply for the consumptive use permit, there are going to be some concerns, I can tell you that right now. And another person, our chairman of the SWCD, David Gunter, third generation in Indian River County, you can check with him. I don't want to speak for him, but he also has some concerns with that.
Thank you. Eric, do you have any comments?
Eric Olson again. Just a quick comment. Again, first of all, the good news is that St. Johns River Water Management District is the policeman. They're the big policeman on the block. When Indian River County submits their permit for any additional wells, it must go through their process of review. We have models. David Toth has a model. Interestingly enough, both modelers got together and basically agreed, well, maybe it's not as bad as what it looks. So we could debate forever under today's scenario and predicting into the future, but ultimately St. John's will say, let's take a look at this thing. Is there a problem? There isn't a problem. We don't see a problem on the immediate future. The models that have been done early on by CDM have been calibrated against actuality, and in reality, there is no major effect that we're seeing on the short term or even on the long term. I mean, that's the data as it is. But either way, St. John's will ultimately be the big policeman on the block and be in a position to say, okay, let's take a look at this thing so that we don't have impacts on adjacent users. I do want to clarify one thing. We do not have any intent in expanding the southern wellfield system adjacent to Oslo Road. The impacts on St. Lucie County have done their deed, and basically, and it's a different geography down there. It's not the same geography. Wells are 10 times more efficient in the north system than they are in the south system, and frankly, that's not our intent. So I do want to clarify. So we are here today, really, to be honest with you, is just to approve the building, and I'll clarify, the buildings are simply to contain the components, the reverse osmosis components within the buildings, chemical components, structural components that are part of the treatment process. That's what the buildings are there for. We're not here today to talk about the wells, but even if we were, the news has basically been that we have looked at the models on both sides. Both modeling groups have looked at each other and basically said, well, I guess you're right. There is no impending doom as we sit here today. We will work closely with Soil and Water. We're working closely with David Gunter. We will calibrate those models. If there's any questions, we'll work and make adjustments as we move down the future. So,
I think for the short term, there's probably not a big concern.
No,
but for the long term now, and I heard a number of 2020 or 2025, that there was going to be some real concerns. And what is the future? Is this site at capacity? Will it be at capacity when you figure this?
As we stand here today,
and then what happens after that site? We're going to go
there are a lot of options that are open to the county 10, 15, 20 years from now. First of all, you can basically spatially change where the wells are located. A lot of places are actually finding themselves in a situation, instead of concentrating them into a single area, they basically spread them out. Now, that's a very expensive process, because well A, that's 3 miles away, you've got to pipe that. Well B, that's 8 miles away. There's options that future maybe going as far as to the Stick Marsh area. Extremely expensive options. I mean, options exist from desalinization. But again, the point being is that Indian River County is not placed in a box to where you're looking at this thing today where you're saying, oh, this is it for forevermore. No, life changes. There are options that have come to bear, and it's like, okay, we'll make those adjustments 10, 15, 20 years from now. It is true that Florida, and we've had presentations by St. John's Water Management District here, it'd be wonderful to say that we had the same water supplies we had 50 years ago. Unfortunately, it's not. And unfortunately, whether we're here or whether we're not here, life will change. But we will make those adjustments accordingly.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Yes, Gary?
Yeah. Eric, what's the potential of running into the same problem in the North County, that's fairly north, that we're running into the South County? I mean, the growth south of our county line's phenomenal, and also the growth to the north in Brevard County is taking a similar path to that of St. Lucie County. Is that going to affect our well fields and what we can do and can't do?
We don't see on the short term, and frankly, even on the long-term horizon, that Brevard County has any real serious impact to us. I will tell you that the water flow, natural hydraulic water flow in the Florida Aquifer basically comes from the northwest to the southeast. It flows, generally speaking, like that. It could be true to say that if you're in Orlando in the northwestern areas, that you're basically siphoning off, theoretically, what would be water downstream of that. But there is no immediate impact. Geologically, there is a much better hydraulic system in the north than we'd see in the south. If I were standing here 25 years from now or 20 years from now, I would say that we would probably be looking at alternative means to address this question. Today, on the basis of what we're planning in terms of the 6 new wells, there's no immediate impact that we see on the horizon.
And the other thing is, as I understand it, we're just looking at the building today, not necessarily the well fields. The other thing is if they don't drill the wells, if we don't use that water or whatever, even short-term, long-term, what alternatives are there? Just desalinization, or what alternatives are there to get water?
You're really faced with two options. You can go into desalinization, and you're talking twice the cost, and on top of all that, you still got to get rid of the concentrate. You're back to square one on that. The St. Johns River Water Management District is actually trying to address issues related to coastal utilities in that same way. They're recommending the potential for alternatives such as ocean outfall. That has permitting problems in itself, and they don't even know where that's going. They're doing studies on that. So desalinization is a possibility. It's being done in parts of the United States. It's being done in Tampa.
Well, I don't think that's
it's extremely expensive, and they've had some real problems in reality with that.
But we don't have a lot of alternatives.
No, at this stage of the game, the county made a good decision in going to the Floridan system. It is the most abundant, predictable water source that's available today. It is clearly the most cost-effective process that's available, and it gives you the best water quality. So, I mean, as far as the option, it would not be a good decision to choose Plan B or C by desalinization. Surficial systems, such as the City of Vero Beach, they have a combined process of deep well Floridan and surficial combination system like that. It's just not the best choice to go to. The county has done the right decision early on in their process, and so we just need to kind of adjust to, as changing circumstances 10, 15, 20 years from now, we'll just make those adjustments.
Thank you. Yes, Sandra?
Mr. Chairman, I do agree that we do have more of a water issue than we have a road issue. We've just not been educated enough for it. But as a farmer, and I do know that there is a pressure problem with the water, and it has been and will continue to be, that probably, if we're just talking about the buildings today, that is an okay go. But I do believe that we need some major people and some major discussion here before we understand the plan that's even before us. And the ramifications of 25 years to me is a real short period of time, because I'm older than you, Wesley. And I think you had a birthday today.
You're older than I am. I'm younger than Wesley.
So I do think the consequences of an uneducated vote has a lot of ramifications, and we need to totally be educated on both the plans here, and the scientists do have continual disagreements with each other, and a lot of times after the fact we know the consequences. I'd like to know the consequences before the fact of water. That is the problem of Florida, is water, and it's going to be from this point on, and has been on the West Coast already, water wars. So I would not oppose the building, but I certainly think that we're not home free on the water issue here.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I've got one question to Eric, and maybe you can help me with this. St. Lucie County, and I know that's South Florida Water Management, right. And I understand, I believe St. Lucie County in general doesn't have their own water treatment plant, or their own water. They have some water issues.
They do.
I think Dr. Baker brought up the fact, or maybe it was Bob, that if we try to do something to our South County system, it affects obviously the North County of Indian River, or North County of St. Lucie County. Do we have any control over what they do in the North County in St. Lucie County that might affect our South County plant?
The answer is yes, we do indirectly. We have the ability, just like any other user, to be able to say, wait a minute, guys, you're impacting an existing user, just like Bob Adair has indicated. We, as we sit here today, have adjusted to that, though. We don't see any decrease in production. The 6 wells that we've got down there are fairly well maximized at this point. We've just adjusted it and basically said, okay, let's live with what we've got. The planning horizon for the well modeling on the north side will take us into 2020, 2025. But again, I would support one consideration is that the Utilities Department bring back to the Commission on a fairly regular basis data update with respect to, because we are working closely with the agricultural. We have actually contacts through David Gunter with the, as a result of Soil and Water Conservation Group, where we're working with them directly to be in a position to test their wells for chlorides and basic drawdowns to confirm that our models basically accurately predict what will take place. And so we are working with Soil and Water and David Gunter. So I would suggest that we just come back occasionally and give the Commission an update. If there's any changes with respect to our predictions with respect to the modeling efforts as seen by St. John's, and perhaps even have someone from St. John's come back again and kind of give an assurance that we are doing the right thing, we could do that.
Good idea. Good idea.
Actually, Mr. Chairman, if I could just make a few more remarks. A couple of years ago, by the way, I'm Bob Keating, Community Development Director. A couple of years ago, the legislature mandated that all local governments in the state prepare public water supply plans as part of their comp plan. And we're currently working with utilities, and utilities and their consultants are going to be the major providers to us of the data and all the detailed scientific and specific engineering information. But I do want to tell you, we have to have our public water supply plan done by 2008 in conjunction with the evaluation and appraisal report of our comp plan, and we're actually starting working on the EAR right now. So I do want to give you the comfort level that we are going to be coming to you, to the Planning and Zoning Commission, to the Utility Committee, and various other groups with all of the evaluation and appraisal report information, but particularly with the public water supply plan. So from a policy standpoint, how you're dealing with this will be some decisions that you'll be having to deal with in the next year or so.
Okay, that's good to hear. So we will be hearing back from you guys. Okay, we're still under public hearing. Yes, ma'am?
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to remind the Commission that what's before the Commission today is the special use exception of expansion of the water plant. But I think the discussion is excellent and well placed.
Good morning. Renee Ramsey, Waverly Place, Vero Beach, and the Civic Association. This whole discussion reminds me of a few years ago, a discussion before a previous county commission discussing whether to allow a large development, North St. Lucie County, that had 90-odd houses they couldn't get certificates of occupancy for because they couldn't provide them with water. And they came to our commission asking them to help them out, get them some water down there. And fortunately, that commission voted against it, said only in cases of extreme emergency, hurricanes on, would they step in to do something like that. So I hope this commission holds the line too.
Thank you. Any further comments from the public? Close the public hearing. What's your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the special request use exception use approval to expand the North County Water Treatment Plant.
And I'll second that. Is there any discussion? Assuming you're ready to vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried unanimously.
Mr. Joe.
Yes.
Baird, would you schedule us at convenience some educational workshops? Because water is, I keep hearing that water is no problem when I ask periodically, you particularly, not to put you on the spot, that we have plenty of water. I'm not sure we do have plenty of water. In my experience in agriculture, the times we need the water, sometimes we don't have the water. And you have to have permitting to even sometimes irrigate your groves. And some go without and some have it. So
Yeah, we'll hold a couple of workshops and some presentations, put it on the agenda.
Back to the agenda. 9A2, AM Developer LLC's request for a plan development, special exception use and preliminary PD plan plat approval for a project to be known as Milano Estates.
This is a request for plan development special exception use approval on a site that is zoned RS6 residential single family up to 6 units per acre. Through the plan development special exception approval process, they can actually come in and get approval to attach units, and that's what's proposed here, some fee simple townhouse units. The subject site is outlined here on the map in red. It's located on the south side of State Road 60, and it's immediately east of Little Portion subdivision here. This is 71st Avenue. These are single-family lots, again, also zoned RS6, the same as the site. The site is designated for up to 8 units per acre on the land use map. Surrounding zoning, there is a multifamily development to the east, zoned RM6. Further to the east of that is 8 unit per acre multifamily project. There's State Road 60, and then multifamily to the north, 8 unit per acre mobile home to the north of that. And on the other side of a Little Portion subdivision is RM6 multifamily zoning. Staff's view of development of this site, in fact, contacted by the applicant early on, to staff, this looked like a reasonable candidate to be rezoned to RM6, like a lot of the surrounding properties. Again, it fronts State Road 60 and is designated for up to 8 units per acre on the comprehensive plan. But staff recommended that instead of rezoning to RM6, that the applicant come forward with a planned development. And in particular, staff's concern was some design controls that could be done through the plan development process to lessen the impacts on the existing single-family subdivision, Little Portion, to the west. And the applicant agreed to come through the plan development process, and that's basically how we got to where we are this morning. Looking at an aerial of the site, again, the site is in the center, outlined in red. Lake in the Woods is the project, the multifamily 6 unit per acre project to the east of this site, a Little Portion over here to the west. Essentially, when you look at this site, you can see it's almost like it was an out parcel to Lake in the Woods project. So any development of this site is going to be next to multifamily units right up against the eastern boundary of this site. One of the other issues that I wanted to bring up in regard to where the site is located, Little Portion subdivision has 70-foot lots. That's the minimum in RS6, but also has lot ownerships that are more than one lot together on that side. This is generally the layout that's proposed. Let me darken that just a little bit. Again, the site is a little bit under 10 acres, and there will be one access point to the site off of State Road 60, a right-in, right-out connection to State Road 60. The proposal would be right at 5 units per acre, not up to the 6 of an RM6, but 5 units per acre. The project itself, in terms of traffic, has been reviewed and approved by traffic engineering and meets the conditional concurrency. Although technically the number of units is not enough to warrant an eastbound right turn lane into the project, because it's a planned development, traffic engineering has recommended that be provided, and subject to getting FDOT permits, that's one of the components of the project, and that's before you all this morning. Also, the project proposes 2 recreation areas, a clubhouse and pool in this area, and a playground and open space and a park area here in the southwest corner of the site itself. Buffers that are proposed all along the perimeters. The State Road 60 buffer is proposed here along the north. If you look a little bit to the east of Lake in the Woods to the club at Vero, you'll see what a State Road 60 buffer looks like in that particular area. On the east and south sides, type C buffers are proposed next to multifamily, Lake in the Woods multifamily, and then here to the west, against Little Portion subdivision, a 30-foot wide type B, as in boy, buffer with a 6-foot opaque feature. I think one of the elements that is most important from staff's view, despite the buffers and so forth, is the actual building orientation on this layout and why it's better than being multifamily zoned, or even better than a single-family design. And let me point out the differences here. Again, Little Portion subdivision, 70-foot lots along the western boundary here. If this were developed as a conventional subdivision under our current RS6 requirements, this is under 10 units per acre. There'd be no buffer, special buffer along this boundary, and you'd essentially line up 70-foot wide lots all the way along this property here, because really this design would basically be because of the dimensions, be a cul-de-sac. You'd have lots lining up this side, 70-foot wide lots, no special buffer, and a 20-foot setback. What we have through the plan development process here is actually building orientation of these townhouse units such that the units are between 50 and 96 feet away from this boundary. And the orientation is particularly good in terms of compatibility because these are the sides of the buildings, the units are oriented toward each other, and they're not lined up along the edges here. So actually what you have are sides of buildings probably across from about every 3 lots in Little Portion, rather than lining up single-family or multifamily buildings if you did not have the PD process and the controls. The Planning and Zoning Commission, because this is a special exception use approval, decided this, or actually made a recommendation on this project, and the recommendation was a vote of 5-2 to deny, or recommend that the board deny the project. And there were a couple of reasons that were given. One was, having townhomes in RS6, in lieu of having residential multifamily, having that in a residential multifamily area. But again, staff's view, as I described at the beginning, was that this is actually a candidate for RM6 zoning. But also there were some concerns mentioned about traffic, but again, traffic, all the circulation standards are met. In fact, with the PD, a special condition can be placed on this project that could not otherwise be placed. And I also wanted to point out, if this were developed conventional single family, you would probably have 3 unit per acre single family. In this proposal, you have 5 units per acre multifamily. That's essentially the same amount of traffic generation, comparing the multifamily to the single family. So there really would be no difference looking at this developed as single family. And again, the traffic standards are met, and that is staff's analysis. The staff's recommendation is that the Board of County Commissioners approve this plan development as the best alternative for developing the site. We have some conditions that we recommend in our report, and those relate to some of the traffic issues and the buffer issues that they'd be installed as proposed. One other item, just because it's been of recent discussion, actually last week, you may recall that there were requirements added to our regulations for multifamily projects regarding buffers and sidewalks and recreation and so forth. This proposal actually meets and in some cases exceeds the requirements that were adopted for multifamily projects last week. It has the pedestrian system, curb and gutter, the recreation areas, and actually has more buffering on the south and east side than what would be required under the regulations adopted last week. Just wanted to add that information. I'd be glad to answer any questions that you might have.
I have one, Stan. You just said, I think you said, 3 acres, 3 units per acre, single family, has the same traffic generation as 5 units per acre, multifamily.
That's correct.
How can that be?
Multifamily generation rates are generally 6 trips per day and 10 trips per day for single family. And so
why would that be?
Why is it a lower generation rate for multifamily than it is for single family? I will not give you all the reasons for that. I'll let traffic engineering or community development director tell you why. I've seen the studies, fewer trips for multifamily units.
Multifamily people have less children, or
those are some of the reasons. I think smaller households, fewer children, but ITE, which is the organization that does studies and is generally the Bible for trip generation, does have those numbers that Stan referenced.
Okay.
So usually it's about 40% less.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions of staff?
I've got one, Stan, and I guess you probably answered a lot of that. And I did have the opportunity of attending this at the Planning and Zoning meeting the night they presented it. I like the layout that's taken place here. And if you can go back to the map that you show with Lake in the Woods and Vista Plantation across the street, and again, I reiterate, as we begin to have locations to allow these types of developments, this is one of them. If you look at the club at Vero Beach to the east of Lake in the Woods, I think it's pretty much a same type of setup. But getting into the backup, and obviously under the trade-offs, it does provide a minimum of 42-foot setback, which is even more of an increase. And I think it's one of those things we've asked developers to do, is to come in under a PUD, so we have a whole lot more scrutiny on it and can begin to design it. And I do like the way that the buildings are designed. I think we're especially talking about a 30-foot type B buffer now with a 6-foot opaque feature, which adds a whole lot more landscaping than in the past. And I think this is the location for this development.
Okay, any other questions of staff before I open the public hearing? Gary?
I see they've covered the stormwater drainage and so on and so forth in there, but concern I would have is the drainage coming from that property into the single-family residence, which is an older neighborhood to the west. And the other question I would have is, I think a lot of these developments, and some of them are already there, but we ought to have some provision for a southern entrance and exit as this area builds out, so we can have connectivity down to, I guess, 16th Street is the next road down there. I know I think there's a dirt road back there and runs along the canal, and I think Lake in the Woods has a rear access point.
Yes, it does.
And the property that's TR14 on here, drainage area, is that a part of Lakes in the Woods, or is there a possibility of getting something with access out the southern route? We're going to have, how many people are going to be in there? 50 units, so 100 people, and we keep dumping more and more on Route 60, which is a very heavily traveled 4-lane. And
right, this is a good issue. There are 49 units that are proposed on this site, so they don't meet our requirement of having to have an emergency access or secondary access, but it's always a good idea. This is one of the issues. There's actually a right-of-way that stubs out right now from Little Portion subdivision. Again, we've had contact with owners along Little Portion subdivision. This actually came out at the Planning and Zoning Commission as well. Their desire to not stub out or have this project interconnect with that right-of-way. I believe it's a paper right-of-way right now that's used by the people to the north and south of it. One other issue that, as far as that comment goes, though, the driveway for Lake in the Woods wraps around this side and down here in the southeast corner of this project, and especially down here at the southeast corner, it comes very close. And if you look at the design of this project site, there is a possibility, and in fact we brought this up at the TRC meeting, if there's a possible future connection point between Lake in the Woods and this project driveway down there in the southeast corner, at least this design accommodates that. There are two private parties, private driveway and so forth, but we have at least looked at the design to accommodate that potential at some point in the future, but we can't require it because it's a private driveway.
well, the problem with making arrangements to accommodate, we run into this time and time again, that the old neighborhood doesn't want any of the new neighborhood coming through on their streets. We've run into it north of 43rd. We ran into it with down out from South County, Turtle Creek, and we run into this consistently. And I'd like to see the two parties get together prior to this being approved and getting access. We just keep dumping everything onto our main arteries, and they're going to get clogged, and it's just going to get worse and worse as we grow if we don't have some connectivity and other avenues of access or ingress and egress.
Seems like the southwest corner of this property butts onto a street, must be 18th Street, I guess. And does that subdivision, what you call a little portion, does it exit to 16th Street also?
Yes, a little portion does go all the way down to 16th.
And it could be a access to the south there off that southwest corner, could it not?
Right, and again, this is, the connectivity issue is, we are very aware and have been for quite a while. It's not the kind of issue that you can really look at in a vacuum. And essentially, based on what we sense, staff senses as a policy direction from the board, is that when you have existing subdivisions, hooking a new project up through to an existing subdivision can be really problematic. What we've tried to, the best results we've had, obviously, is where you're dealing with new properties and new connections and so forth. And again, we've gotten input from the neighbors here, no desire to hook up their subdivision with this multifamily. We did see, hooking up multifamily to multifamily as an option that could work best. And we'd like to see the developers or the private parties come to an agreement on that. We can't force that, though.
And the other problem I have is putting such high density next to the single-family neighborhood to the west. Those are three of the concerns that I have about this.
Okay. All right, any further questions before I open the public hearing?
Yes, just one. Stan, the subdivision, little subdivision next door, thank you. That's public street?
Yeah. Any other questions of staff? We haven't opened the public hearing yet. Any other questions of staff? All right, public hearing is open.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Bruce Barquette. I'm representing the applicant, AM Developers, and I'll keep my comments brief because the traffic engineers here and the project engineers here, Bill McCain, and he's going to give a presentation highlighting some of the things that Stan talked about. But I wanted to point out that I wanted to reiterate what Stan said. When we first came in with the applicant in this project, we went to Bob and Stan. We had the meeting, and we always have a pre-application conference. And I said, look at this piece of property. It's surrounded by RM6, and it really should be RM6. And Bob said, yes, we would support an application for RM6 because you're right, that makes sense. But wouldn't you please consider doing a PD, because that would give the commission and the Planning and Zoning Commission a little more comfort to see exactly what you're designing, and it would allow you to do this building layout that you're seeing today. And being the agreeable guy that I am, I said, no, I want RM6 because then I can build what I want by right. But my client and my engineer said, no, if that's going to give the county commission and the Planning and Zoning Commission more comfort and allow them to design the buffers the way they want, then they'll do it that way. So they did come up with the design that you see, and it is an exemplary design. It's only 5 units per acre instead of the 8 that's permitted under your comprehensive plan. Instead of 25-foot setbacks, it's got a minimum of 42-foot setbacks. Open space, instead of 40%, it's got 68%. Buffers, instead of 0 to 25, it's got 30 to 42 feet of buffers. Instead of all type Cs, it's got type Cs and type B buffers. So this location and this project is what you want for your PDs along State Road 60, and you shouldn't punish applicants and developers who try to comply with. I know you like PDs, Commissioner Davis. I don't especially like them because it allows you guys to sort of freeform it up there, but you like them. But this is the kind of thing that you, honestly, you've told us you want to encourage it. Our engineers, our clients have heard you, and so before I turn it over to Mr. Kane, I just wanted to point that out to you. And I'm here to answer any questions if you have any, but the tough ones you'll have to get from Bill McCain.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions? Mr. McCain.
Good morning, Chairman Newberger, Commissioners. I would like to say ditto, but I did that at P&Z, and it did not serve us very well as our recommendation.
Imagine that.
You're
You're not going down that path again, huh?
I'm not going to do that path again. A couple of just very brief things, and staff, I've got to commend them. They did an excellent job in presenting our position on this, and there has been quite a bit of thought and quite a bit of work that's gone into this process. As you can imagine, a developer coming from South Florida buying what he thought he could get 8 units per acre on. And then with my background with GAC and discussions with the GAC, some of which the members are here today to speak on behalf of this, and knowing what the county wanted to do and the direction they wanted to go, we did convince the developer that this was his best option. And that, in itself being a struggle. What you've just been handed is a list of design requirements that we looked at based on various zonings, RM8, RM6, PD, or the underlying RS6. I'm not going to belabor going through every column I have here. Stan has touched on them. I guess the bottom summary is, if you look at the last 2 columns there of the proposed PD, which we are proposing, versus the GAC, which, of course, I was aware these things were coming. We started this process 6 to 7 months ago, so we were way ahead of the curve with it. And as was stated by staff, we exceed all of these requirements, both in buffering, density of bufferings, setbacks, phenomenally different. We look at the site, and I put this aerial up. I guess I'm not Elmo astute. It does give you a better look. It's an old grove. The perimeter of the grove is surrounded by very nice palms, some nice oak vegetation, which we are maintaining all of. If not maintaining it in place, digging it up and relocating it around the slight berms that we are creating. So you will have, and I guess the term everybody likes to use, instant gratification when it comes to the landscaping of this project. That being said, if you could hand them the rest of these. The elevation of the building settings, we did go lower on the ends, and you've got some shots and elevation views of the ends of the buildings, which essentially is what is going to be facing the single-family residential. And I have some close friends and people that have worked with me that live in it. So it was paramount to me in personal relationships and on the basis of what the county wants to see, to develop this in a fashion where it had the least amount of impact where it should, and that being on that single-family residential. As staff pointed out, we would end up with a line of single-family homes, 70-foot wide lots backing right up to the adjoining subdivision. Commissioner Wheeler, on your question of drainage, I'll stick in real quickly too as I jump to the next, back to my other layout that Stan had up. There's an existing ditch that runs behind the lots in Little Portion subdivision, which currently conveys their stormwater out. It will pick up a small amount of the existing area, which we're basically leaving untouched at the western edge of our berm and planting, so we will not be adding any additional stormwater load onto them. I did just I'll show you the pretty picture and then I'll justify it. As we look at, this would be the back side of the vegetative planting that's proposed against Little Portion subdivision. In essence, if you look, and everybody says, well, it's not going to grow in that way, but you can just barely see the rooftops of the buildings, if at all. I did a very quick line of sight drawing, assuming a 5'6" man and his eyes being in that location, over to the top of our proposed buildings. In essence, they will have a 9-foot, not a 6-foot, opaque feature coming off because of the elevation differential between their slabs and where we are 3 foot above. So you're going to have 9 foot, then you're going to have canopy trees that already exist up above that. So I think the impact will be greatly reduced, if any at all. I'll show you one more pretty picture, and then I'm going to deal very briefly with the interconnectivity. Obviously, that's an embellishment, which is why I showed you the line of sight picture first. But by utilizing our existing plantings that are there, we will have a situation, I believe, that will give us instant gratification with the buffers. In looking here on the artist rendering, which is very nice, to the east side, Lake in the Woods has an existing 6-foot high buffer along their perimeter. I believe it's 15 foot in width, that we are actually going to be backing our buffer up to. So in essence, you're going to have their existing 15 or 20 foot buffer with the 6-foot opaque feature. Then immediately behind that is going to be our 25-foot buffer. Because of the close proximity of the units in Lake in the Woods to our site, we wanted to ensure that we did give them good coverage. And you can see particularly on the back end back here, the units are right up against the property line, save the buffer. Now, we did look at interconnectivity to that road. There is a partial right-of-way to the south of our property, which has not been abandoned. Half of it has been when Lake in the Woods was done. We are doing interconnectivity to their main lift station, and this property, staff had mentioned that this was essentially looked at as an out parcel of Lake in the Woods. They had even provided for sewer service for this property. We are interconnecting in that regard. Because of where the utilities come in there, and because of right-of-way issues, and obviously dealing with an outside party, doing even an emergency entrance was not feasible in the preliminary discussions that we had. That being said, we have our traffic engineer here to take any questions. We have our architect with us. If there are any questions with regard to that, Mr. Charlie Block, Kimley Horn is representing us for traffic purposes. We are here for any questions, and I would like to reserve the right after the public hearing to come back and readdress if I need to.
Question?
Yes, sir.
How did you come up with a 5'6" person? Is that for Wesley or?
Well, I figured I was about 6'2", so I just gauged. And valid question.
All right.
Oh.
Public hearing is still open. Young lady.
My name is Gina Melton. I live in Little Portion subdivision where these gentlemen are looking to back their properties up against too. We have several concerns. First of all, we've all driven down State Road 60. They're proposing you're going to make a U-turn into their subdivision. That is not practical. Once they widen State Road 60 to 3 lanes, you're going to have to cross 3 lanes of traffic to get into a right turn lane. Am I correct? If you're coming from the east to the west, you have to make a U-turn. You will cross 3 lanes of traffic into a right turn lane into their subdivision. This is not safe. State Road 60 has wrecks every day right in that general area. I know, I hear the sirens. Okay. Their current driveway, I'm not sure if what the proposal is on that, but it will not hold 10-ton trucks. So will they be using our subdivision for a thoroughfare for their big equipment? Our roads in that subdivision, if you gentlemen will take a drive through, will not hold large trucks. The county keeps up the maintenance on those roads, but it's just not meant for that. The traffic of approximately, you figure 49 units is going to have approximately 70 cars, and that's being very, very fair. 70 cars added into, if they came through this access you're also discussing, through our subdivision, it can't handle 70 more cars. We're already getting the backflow from Point West Golf Course coming through our subdivision, because that gravel road everybody's talking about goes right along their golf course. When you get done playing golf, everybody shoots right up that to avoid the signal light at 674th. These are some things we really need to take into consideration. As a neighborhood, we know somebody's going to build something there. We're not stupid. But we don't think multifamily, 2-story high, fitting 79 or 49 units, which you're going to look at least a minimum of 100 people, and how they figure that it's going to take less traffic for more people is beyond me. That's the math I have yet to figure out. But how is that going to be better for that area? There's a lot of multi-zoned family properties around there. Do you need one more? Honestly? I mean, if you think about it, I've got newspaper articles here where we have, and I know we all get real big on the Pettit Press Journal, but there is information in here stating that we've got tons of properties for sale, and that the market's going stagnant. So do we want to have 49 vacant proposed units? This gentleman's touted, he's sitting on the Growth Awareness Committee. He's also financially involved in this. Now, if this was a Meritrend subdivision, would he be so excited about it from the Growth Awareness Committee standpoint? I mean, these are things we really need to take into consideration. At Planning and Zoning, he also stated that this was the high end of affordable housing. Well, I hate to tell you, gentlemen, there's nowhere near affordable housing on that. He grabbed me after the Planning and Zoning meeting and said that we needed to speak up for this subdivision, or he was going to build junk. Now, affordable housing in the Indian River County, based on the SHIP program guidelines, the most a home can cost is $189,682. The minimum price for these townhomes is $220,000. Down payment assistance, you would have to make $50,000 to receive $20,000. You can't afford that. What the consumer would make, he would have to have absolutely no debt. You're not even taking into consider association dues, which I'm sure this project will have. He's showing beautiful pictures. They don't show our storm drainage. Do you know our storm drainage that sits behind our homes is only about this high? And that's me in no heels, standing out there barefooted. That is not going to hold any additional waters. When we do have hurricanes, it is all those drainage ditches can do to keep from flooding our yards. And part of our neighborhood does get rather wet. Now, you're going to put these townhomes at a higher elevation. You can't tell me that those waters are not going to drain into our properties. These are things I don't think everybody's considering. Planning and Zoning did decline this particular project. I don't want to see junk come in, but I don't want to see a two-story townhome. This was originally plotted by a gentleman who lives in our neighborhood as residential single-family dwellings. That's what it needs to stay to be. We don't mind that. We know it's coming. We can't change it. We don't want to stop growth. But guys, you got to, ladies and gentlemen, you really need to think about what we're doing in this county. We've got all these huge subdivisions with cookie-cutter homes. Drive down 58. It looks like Monopoly hotels. It's a shame.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Just hypothetically, if this was single-family, would your neighborhood support the connectivity?
At which section?
Well, where the stub-out is currently.
Two stub-out.
About in the middle.
There's two.
Okay, two stub-out. Well, both of them. If this was single-family, do you think the neighborhood would support the single-family connecting so you'd have interconnectivity between neighborhoods?
Sir, I don't feel that our road could support any additional traffic.
Well,
at all.
It would be, both would have traffic. I mean, your neighborhood would be through theirs, theirs would be through yours.
It wouldn't be a gated community where we would have access to through their community as well.
Ideally, that would be my, yeah.
That would be the only way that our neighborhood would be with it, would be if we would have access to theirs as well.
Well, yes, it would. It'd be two ways. It'd be just a continuing of the streets. You'd have ingress and egress from both neighborhoods.
Where does that take you? Those two roads only take you into those two subdivisions. You're still going to have to go out onto 60 or to that gravel road to the very end that runs next to Point West's golf course. That's the only roads that have access anywhere else, and you're still going to have to end up on 60 because you're going to be on 74th Avenue.
So basically, you wouldn't be in favor of connectivity even if it was single family?
No, sir.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other comments from the audience?
Good morning. I'm Joseph Paladin. I am the chairman of the Growth Awareness Committee, and I basically am speaking in favor of this project for a couple of reasons. Number one, any project that comes in and meets all of our buffers that we put forth in the Growth Awareness Committee that doesn't have to and doesn't hold me up because they came in under the wire, I take a second look at. Number two, the creativity that staff put together in arranging these buildings basically is a plus in my eyes, because looking at it from another neighborhood with the setbacks and with the buffers, you basically got a better view than you would a two-story home, or even in some cases a one-story home that's almost as high as a two-story home, which we ran into before.
and them trying to meet all the requirements of setbacks and green space and all the other things we've done as a Growth Awareness Committee, I respect that. And so I'm in favor of the project for those reasons. And plus, let me clarify workforce housing, because I'm also on the Workforce Housing Committee. The price range of workforce housing in our community is somewhere between $104,000 and $213,000. That's between very, very low, low, and moderate. And that's the ranges in workforce housing. This is at the very high end of workforce housing. I'm not really, what can you do? I mean, I'd like to see houses for $104,000, but at the price of land today, we have to use a land trust or something else or some other remedies that we're basically working on to meet those needs, which we are working on. And the last and final, this is almost more important. When we made all these upgrades to standard subdivisions, you know, buffers and setbacks and stormwater, curbs, sidewalks, etc., and people wanted to come in and have different things done to their subdivisions, we wanted to encourage people not to be afraid to come in as a PD. And previously, it was always said, you're out of your mind to go before the P&Z or come before the county as a PD because they just hold you up to so many improvements you can't afford to do it. So whenever staff recommends a project comes in as a PD, based on our recommendation and based on our hard work of trying to get people to come in as a PD, and I hate to see people being penalized for that and guided towards going for a rezoning, taking up more of our time, and not coming in as a PD. I like to see people come as a PD so you all can have some input as far as design and connectivity in some cases, and buffers and green space and different things you should need. I really promote PDs. I like to see PDs come in. So, and under subdivisions that are 10 acres and under, that's where you have a real hard time. 10 acres and under, bad. You know, it's hard to design anything of any creativity. You put a road down the middle of the street with a cul-de-sac, houses or buildings on both sides, there you go. That's my creativity. You know, Architecture 101. This shows a little more creativity, and I respect that. And I have no financial involvement in this project or financial gain. I'm strictly speaking to you as a chairman of the Growth Awareness Committee. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Paladin. Anyone else? Dr. Cox?
Thank you, Commissioner Newberg. David Cox, Periwinkle Drive, also a member of the Growth Awareness Committee. And an interested citizen. I have no financial involvement in this project, and I'm amazed. I totally agree with everything that Bruce Barquette said in his brief summary at the beginning, and this is just astonishing. I thought he did an excellent job of summarizing the main points. The underlying land use designation of this property is M1, and I always used to resent it when people pointed out the obvious facts to me when I was on planning and zoning, and an applicant would say, well, we could have come in with this, and I'd kind of feel like, well, they're trying to hold me up here. But in fact, I think it's really important to look at that very first page of the staff analysis and their presentation to remind yourself that these gentlemen were steered into the PD process for very good reasons, because we generally get a higher quality product as a result of that. They could have gotten, I mean, it's on the land use map, they could come forward to get more density. And I understand that the NIMBY perspective. Nobody likes rezonings when their intensity is going up right next door. But that's been on the future land use map for years. It's no surprise. And I think that the process has worked. The quality is there in this particular project. I'm amazed with what they were able to do on under 10 acres. And they met all of the guidelines, as we raised the bar for multifamily development, I think that Mr. McCain, because he was in on the discussions, anticipated what those were going to be, designed them in ahead of time, and didn't try to squeeze a project in 2 weeks before we got those new guidelines passed. So I think that this is, the State Road 60 corridor is exactly where in the comp plan you want to have your density. I think that with the improvements to the Road 60 corridor, the widening, all of the right-in, right-out projects that are standard design for that State Road 60 corridor are going to confront the same kinds of issues as they close the median cuts. They're going to confront the same issues with provisions for U-turns. Presumably DOT is on top of this, and they're going to be addressing these traffic flow issues on a broader scale than just a single project, and I think that traffic safety in that corridor, I think we do have to have some measure of trust that DOT is going to handle that. I think that the project shows great creativity and meets all of our guidelines, so I think it's appropriate for its location, and hope that you can support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cox. Anyone else from the audience wish to be heard? Ms. Gardner?
Good morning. My name is B. Gardner. I agree with most everything that's been said. This is probably one of the most creative in a 10-acre site, creative PDs I've seen in a 10-acre site, and there are so many pluses, being that it's almost double bermed, if you want to call it that, between the Vero Lake Estates and this area. So the creativity is there, but I think that this is probably a good time to stop and think about density versus safety. And when you consider the fact that the only thing that seems to be of issue in my thoughts is this unsafe ingress-egress from 60th, State Road 60. So you think about that and you think, well, if this were an isolated situation, you know, an isolated 10 acres that they're building into a semi-upscale, you know, condominiums or some sort like that, it's wonderful. But if you don't start to get really tough on this interconnectivity, you're going to have this issue come up over and over and over again, just like you had a few weeks ago. I think it was in Tommy's neighborhood. Of course, the neighbors that are already there don't want more people coming through their neighborhood. That's just like McCanch Park or any of the other supposedly nice neighborhoods in Old Vero. You know, every time more homes were built or more roads started to they were bringing in more traffic, and they didn't like it. But that's what it's like when you live in a community, and we have to think of ourselves as a community called Indian River County, rather than Vero Lake Estates or Walker's Glen. These are neighborhoods that are isolating themselves from this interconnectivity, and I think possibly there might be a way that our planning department can find ways to change the LDRs in such a way that each community needs to start to interconnect with one another, even though they seem to be so isolating themselves. My recommendation is that you take a hard look at passing this without that interconnectivity, because I think down the road you can't imagine what's going to happen on Route 60 when somebody has to make a U-turn just to get home. Or this continues to be a problem down the road. So it's up to us to solve this problem. And if that's the only reason this were denied today, until they can get that interconnectivity, and Gary Wheeler was right, you've got to start thinking about this in all these PDs, because you can't deny the fact that this is a beautiful PD. I mean, it's well laid out. there's not much you can say about it. And yeah, they do come up and tell you, well, we could build 8 houses here, but we've only built 5. We can do this, we can do that. And they're giving you all these, the aesthetics are fine, but you got to start worrying about this interconnectivity, because down the road, you can't imagine what's going to happen. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, B. Yes, sir?
My name is Major Searles. I live at Little Portion Subdivision on the east side. Everything has pretty well been said. As a concerned citizen, I'm very concerned about the safety of our people in our county, and the interest of that section now, there's one little single bridge. There's one home in there. I mean, Ms. Lowenstein, I think, owns that property.
Yeah.
And her home is still there. They had that one bridge there for that purpose. And my question is to the builders, what are they going to do? I mean, if they don't leave that existing little bridge, I mean, to start their project, they would have to upgrade all of that. And
I'm sure they will.
It has been stated already, 49 homes, you will have, I'd say, approximately 75 to 80 cars daily. If they're heading west to get into their property, make a U-turn across a 3-lane road, and it's approximately 50 yards to the entrance of that. And these trucks coming in, heading east on Route 60, the speed limit on that road is 55 miles per hour. They're doing 55 to 70. And I can see people making a U-turn doing 15 miles an hour to get into their project. And a 18-wheeler, 18-ton truck coming down that road trying to brake to keep from rearing any of these people making a U-turn. I think it should be looked at very seriously before you approve this as it stands at this time. Thank you.
We will. Anyone else wish to be heard? Are we through? Mr. McCain?
I'll be very brief. First, there is a new entrance being built. We will not be using her access point that exists now currently for the single-family house. That will also support the construction entrance. We've had numerous...
Someone mentioned using the Little Portion subdivision for access. You need to address that.
That will not be done. In fact, on our plans, we show our construction entrance is coming through the main entrance of the subdivision until such time as that is completed. And that is demonstrated on our plans that are in for permitting.
And what about the drainage? So you're going to be using their drainage? Or
No.
You're going to let any water off your property?
There will be obviously the backside of the berm, which we're constructing in the 30-foot area for the buffer zone, which will drain back into that ditch, and in fact is a smaller area of the property than is now currently draining into their ditch. As far as discussions of who said what to who, there were comments made earlier, and I'm not really going to address it straight on, but the thought was that this product was the best product for the site, not that we would come in and build junk. As far as financial involvement of myself in the project, if anybody saw my fees I was getting on this, I have very little, if any, financial involvement in this project. And I think pretty much typically we know how that falls out. DOT is working on a plan right now to close numerous of the crossovers on State Road 60 when they go to the 6 lanes. In fact, they have asked us at this point not to construct a turn lane. We are, at staff's request, going back and dealing with them to try to get a shorter turn lane if we can in between Little Portion subdivision and our entrance. And if we can accomplish that, we certainly will. DOT has plans for various turn lanes all along this area, as I say, as well as closing numerous of the crossovers. So I believe they are addressing the safety and traffic issues sufficiently. As far as regard to workforce housing, I believe the statement was made that some of the pre-construction prices might go into that arena. This is not designed as a workforce, maybe attainable, that knocks you up 10, 20,000 over that, but certainly not as a workforce, although we all know pre-construction prices can come in that range very easily. So just for clarification purposes, we do have our traffic engineer here if you have any additional questions. And with that, thank you very much.
I'm Charles Block, to architect the project. I guess, have a financial interest in this, but I thought I'd comment for a minute. I don't do a lot of single-family subdivisions, but I've been doing architecture here for over 30 years. And I did some of your low-cost housing, matter of fact, all your low-cost housing for this county commission. There's a point where designers' creativity comes from parameters that are set, and I think you have an opportunity in this project to. We've worked with all the parameters that were discussed, including this. I think Gary's comment about the interconnecting, and we have isolated away to that because that's consideration and not impacting this subdivision. We've done everything we can from a drainage, traffic, to meet all the criteria that's been presented. But somewhere along the line, creativity comes from parameters, and that's what you try to create, and that's what we're trying to do with this subdivision. This is a cutout of a multifamily project. You can look at it from any way you want to look at it. It's surrounded by multifamily. If you put single family in it, then you're going to force single family against surrounded by multifamily. This is a unique piece of property in the sense that was part of the parameters. The orientation of the buildings were based on impacting the single family as minimal as possible. You got a 40-foot in building. If you line up your typical subdivision, 10-acre subdivision, you're going to have a wall of houses with swimming pools on the backside, all facing towards this single family. Where this multifamily, you have the opportunity as a county commission and your staff to put in all the input for the betterment of the community as a whole, and we take those and we try to design a factor. I will tell you, this is not what you consider low cost or probably workforce housing, but it looks very nice. It's very creative in the sense of the orientation of the buildings to give a good product on a 10-acre site. It was very tight. So, you take your drainage and your circulation of traffic, and obviously single family was of concern, and it's been. That's why we want the interconnected road. I will tell you, in our commercial development, because I do a lot of that, we have those connections are mandated by the county to have that connection. I will tell you, in my developments, I don't want to have it because I don't want the traffic. But that's the same thing you have with single family. But in this particular case, we isolate ourselves from that because it was something that we felt that subdivision and their input doesn't want the traffic. So we have totally isolated this piece of property through this mechanism, which is your PD, to isolate that single family from this development. And we've done I think a good job in meeting all that criteria and parameters. And we hope, even though I might be a paid gun, I think this is a very good solution of a 10-acre subdivision, multifamily that's in the middle of multifamily, as well as having one side by a single family.
I have a question, Charlie.
Yes, here.
Charlie, is this proposed to be gated?
I believe it is proposed to be gated, yes.
Any other questions?
I've got one question, one comment, and Bob Stan or Jim Davis could probably answer this. I know on State Road 60, and unfortunately, State Road 60 is what it is, and if you get down to the portion that is 6-lane, which is in front of Sonny's, you pull out of Sonny's on the Eastern Drive, and you want to come back, obviously you have to get over 3 lanes of traffic, turn left there at almost the State Farm, and come back in that direction. Unless you're Wesley, he'll just jump the curve and do what he needs to do.
Now, Wesley, I know you don't do that.
Got a big truck.
And obviously, it's the entrance that you catch right there. If you come out of the west entrance of Sonny's, that you can do a U-ey if you want to, or turn left and go down 50th that has the speed bumps that Mr. Wheeler didn't help him with. And I think it's one of those situations that's one access I think we were in hopes of trying to close. But we do have these, and if you look right in front of us at the Club of Vero, they have to do a U-ey, unfortunately, in front of Lake in the Woods to get to their establishment. So that's almost a mirror image of what we're looking at here with Milano.
Any other comments before I close the public hearing? We are way over the time to take our break. Okay, what's your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman, I've got a few questions.
We have a motion, we have a second? You second?
I'll second it.
Staff recommendation, okay.
Staff recommendation.
Tommy did.
I'll second.
Go ahead.
Yes. Bob, real quick, there's nothing in if this were to go forward as an RS6 subdivision, there's nothing that would preclude 2-story buildings from being constructed?
It could even be 3-story.
3-story on RS6?
Yes.
What are the side setbacks for RS6?
The side setbacks are 10 feet.
So they could be looking down a 20-foot alley?
Yes.
On each
Yes.
side?
Yes.
3 stories tall.
3 stories, okay. And then in addition to that, what other, I was under the impression that subdivisions that are less than 10 acres are exempt from a lot of the ordinances that we have passed. And assuming they use the native vegetation buffers to reduce it down to a 50, and really my question is if this came in as a subdivision, what would be the number of units, in your opinion, on this acre or this parcel of land on RS6? Seeing how it's exempt from many of the ordinances that we use the pending ordinance to.
Instead of 49, it's probably 32, 33. Because this is R6, they can be 70-foot lots, 70 by 100-foot lots. Actually, being under 10 acres, this subdivision would be exempt from the buffer requirement, so it wouldn't have to do the native vegetation to get down from 25 to 50. That's correct.
And I understand the residents' concern, and I think one of the main things that I have the largest concern about is the subdivisions in the community. And if you drive around the community and you look at the most aesthetically unpleasing residential development, you'll find, in fact, they are subdivisions and not planned developments. To address the issue as far as how much open space and how much of height you're going to see, what we have the opportunity here, because this is a planned development, is we had a lot of say-so in the placement and the alignment of the buildings. And a good example of what got us thinking in that direction is if you have the opportunity to go look at the Palms of Vero, they have their back doors immediately adjacent to 12th Street with minimal buffering. And in this instance, it's something totally different. You have a heavy buffering. You have a road in between you and the heavy buffering before you even get close to the buildings that it looks like at least a breeze can go down through, which in the straight subdivision, I'm not sure that we'd get that accomplished. So from that standpoint, I would much rather it stay in Grove. But in light of something going in there, I'm going to support staff's recommendation.
Is there any further comments?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I tend to go with the planning and zoning recommendation, and I do think that this is a creative, good look, and I compliment you for that and your creativity. But I also think a single-family residential could be creative too. And to just say that we would not put a buffer or creativity in single-family, I think is a misnomer. No. And so I want to speak on that side of the equation, not just on the one-sided. And I just think the residents have good points. I think planning and zoning has good points, and do not wish to rezone this property.
Thank you. Any further comments?
Yeah, I would support the motion if two other things were added. One is no gate, and secondly is working out something with the woods next door to have ingress and egress from, I think it's 16th Street back there. If we had ingress and egress through the project with no gate and the interconnectivity, I'd support the motion. Otherwise, I will not.
Thank you. Any further comments? I assume you're ready to vote. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries 3-2. We need to take a break right now. 10-minute break. Call the meeting back to order, and we're still in public items. And I believe the next one is a public hearing. Ken Chapin's request for abandonment of a portion of a 10-foot wide alley lying immediately west of 126th Court. Mr. Bowling.
Yes, sir. The subject site is located west of I-95 on the south side of County Road 512. You can see the block and lot layout here on the slide. 512 is here along the top of the page. Along the right-hand side is 126th Court. The applicant owns these 3 lots that are together, that are adjacent to the segment that's in question. It is a paper alley that was platted in 1958 with the plat of the overall subdivision. And again, if this right-of-way abandonment is approved, then this right-of-way property would actually go to the applicant because he owns the property on both sides of the requested segment. Because he controls all of the property here, there are a couple of arrangements going through the staff review of this process for the abandonment. Staff does not have any objections to the abandonment as long as there's a drainage and utility easement retained across this right-of-way area. There's also a limited access easement that will be established across the 512 frontage so that if this site redevelops, the access will be from 126th Court. And there will be no need for this alley to be used as an access that's alternative to County Road 512. One other item I do want to point out, even though the county under the recommendation would retain a drainage and utility easement here, as we've done on other sites before, if a redevelopment site plan comes in and there's a relocation proposed that makes sense, staff would entertain that, and that issue could come back before the county at some future date if the site is redeveloped. Staff's recommendation is that the Board of County Commissioners abandon the 10-foot alley, accept a limited access easement, and retain a drainage and utility easement over the right-of-way area. I'd be glad to answer any questions that you might have.
A couple questions. It says on page 226, limited access easement will not preclude access to Lot 2. Lot 2 will be able to access from 126th Court. How?
Right. Again, what the situation here is this: that the same owner, one person owns lots 2, 3, and it's lot 11 together, and so the site will be developed or redeveloped together. In other words, there'll be a limited access easement here, and lot 2 will be part of lot 3 and lot 11, one site.
So he'll access it through lot 3.
Yes, exactly. There'll be shared access.
How? Once he does this, do those lots lose their value as independent lots?
Right now, there's actually construction on Lot 3 and part of Lot 2. They're actually basically used together, and that's correct. In other words, they will have to be to work together, almost like a unity of title for these lots to function. There'll have to be alternate access. It could conceivably be sold off, but they'd have to have shared access off of 126.
What's directly east?
126th Court.
So you're closing that off. I mean,
no,
access from those lots, you're not closing that. I mean, access. Why wouldn't using that? Why wouldn't you include it all the way out for lot 4 and 1 and so on and so forth in the entire street?
Right, and staff would probably look the same way if the owners of lots 1 or 4 came in and requested an abandonment of the rest of this. That'd be the same situation. If we do get a request in from those owners at some point in time, we would be looking at the same arrangement.
We're letting him be the pointer dog.
Mm-hmm. Any questions to Stan?
What? The pointer dog.
No questions?
Dog.
All right, I'm going to open the public hearing. Anyone wish to be heard on this item? Yeah. Mr. Chapin's request. Public hearing is closed.
Move approval.
Been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. 984, Worthington S. Cavil's request for abandonment of a portion of 13th Street lying immediately east of 32nd Avenue.
This site is part of the Vero Park unplatted subdivision. It was a subdivision created around 1960. We have some of these in the county. A map was recorded or deeds were recorded, but not an actual plat in dedication. The road rights-of-ways that are reflected on the property appraiser's parcel maps and shown here show blocks and rights-of-way, but again, they were not dedicated by plat. These roadways that go through the subdivision are open to the public and do function today as public roads, but this segment is a segment that is lined up as essentially a stub out. It's never been used as a road right-of-way, and it's not needed for access to any of the adjacent lots. You can see from the aerial that this particular right-of-way segment, there are trees and a swale in the right-of-way. The owner requesting the abandonment lives here to the south of it. We've had contact with the neighbor to the north and to the east through our abandonment process, and there appear to be no objections at this time for granting the request. Staff's recommendation is that this right-of-way segment be abandoned, whatever interest the county has in it be abandoned, and that a drainage and utility easement be retained. Be glad to answer any questions that you might have.
That's what happens to interconnectivity.
Well, what you have in this particular case...
It was intended with the subdivision to the left, but the piece to the right, they didn't follow up.
Let me show you.
The commission was the same philosophy this one's got.
That's correct.
Probably did that back in the 90s.
The properties to the east are accessed off of 30th Avenue, the street here. They're all unplatted and larger parcels, and actually they cannot be further divided. The one-time splits have been used up along this entire area.
Okay, any further questions of Mr. Bowling? If not, we'll open a public hearing. Anybody from the audience wish to be heard? Mr. Evans.
Good day, Ralph Evans, Worth Kevel, who's the property owner. I just want to go through a couple things and ask for something here, if I may. And it's important just to give you a short history, if I can. Did you take your picture with you, Stan? Yeah, that one. All right, see it? I'm sorry. The reason Mr. Kevel asked for this abandonment turns, and this picture will tell a lot for you. What you can barely see here along this line, whoops, right above the red line, you see a little white running through there? That actually is his driveway. And he lives in a home on that lot that was built in 1956. And here is the piece as you see it for survey for abandonment purposes. You see the dirt driveway, that's what you can see in the picture under the trees. Now, the way that place looks today is a little bit different, and what Mr. Kevel was trying to solve was the problem of his driveway being in the road right-of-way. But it only got started after Hurricane Jean, you see, because all the trees that you see there are gone. In fact, your trees were on his roof. But he was good enough to take those down. He filled that, straightened it all out, and then he came to the county and said, I'd like for you to abandon this. And then early on, the issue was raised about keeping a drainage and utility easement across the entire old right-of-way. Now that's 62 feet plus across there. Well, in the process of this going on, it has gone on for some time, the neighbor to the back and one of his neighbors, this poor subdivision, unfortunately, has no drainage. So they came to the county and they made an arrangement where they now have drainage across the north side of this old abandoned, what I hope will be an abandoned right-of-way.
Is that's where it looks like trees are?
That's just small shrubs right there. Those are shrubs that Mr. Kevel put in when he cleaned all this up. Actually, he graded it and planted it in grass, and it all looked like an extension of his yard.
Show me where the drainage is now.
The drainage now runs from just on the north side of this driveway right through here and picks up the swales that are in the front of that road.
More or less through the middle of the lot?
I believe it is.
Right, to the north side,
okay.
About half of that lot.
Right. So we're asking for the county to give it away but not to keep it. So we realize on abandonment we get fee simple interest, but for you to retain the right for drainage and or utility easement across the entire thing, he still has is faced with the same issue he's always had. That is, his driveway may be in the way someday for what may be some drainage scheme, which apparently has already been satisfied. And quite frankly, I won't comment on how smart it was one way or the other to allow the other subdivision to drain into this one, but in fact it's been done. So the only thing I'd ask in the qualification of this release of the abandonment, maybe Public Works can take a look at this again and say, okay, what we'll do is just keep the drainage and utility easement over the north half of this abandoned property. That in fact is where it is today, and it has been permitted and put in, as opposed to exposing this driveway to the potential of having to be relocated someday, because that's how we all got started, was to protect the driveway that's been there since 1956.
He's not going to acquire the whole piece of property. It's going to be divided
half and half.
Half and half to the neighbor to the north.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, and well, I wasn't quite through. The easement is not affecting his driveway as it now, or the drainage?
It does not, no.
Not affecting his
No,
driveway?
and will not be on that part, will be released to him.
Okay.
You see, his driveway does not quite make it halfway across that 60-something feet.
Okay. But you're afraid that they may expand the drainage sometime and take his driveway? I think that's probably pretty remote, that possibility. Mr. Davis?
If I can say one thing on the south out there.
Okay, would you get to the mic and tell us who you are?
Okay, my name's Worth Kevin, the property owner to the south of that. There is a utility easement for Bell South. I have a buried cable line under my driveway that we've mapped out and had a release from Bell South to give approval, so I can never build a driveway per se, but there's crushed rock that theoretically they could get to at any point in time. So what I'm asking for is they could retain utility easement to the south, but to the north retain the drainage easement.
Right, there's a telephone easement that's been granted in this, as part of this picture, but it's all under his driveway, actually.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
The utility easement basically would entail cables, wires, and lines.
Correct.
Underground or overhead.
Underground.
Or overhead.
Right.
And we're maintaining that on the whole piece, right?
Right. And the drainage easement
To the north.
would be to the north, which would be either an open ditch or a culvert pipe. Or a culvert pipe. Those,
who knows, right. I mean, one of the things that we were curious about when this first came up is I asked him, do you intend to consider a retention pond here someday?
asked him being...
County.
Okay.
Okay, because there was nothing there other than the old stand of Australian pines. I mean, it was a forgotten piece of property until they were blown down. Now, there was a little bit of a scrap over this guy from the east being able to drain through, but that's a given. It's been done. There's a swale there. I don't know how many lots had the benefit of that drainage, 2 or 3 at least, I think.
Okay.
So I don't know what else is going to happen there, but the reason we started this was to solve the problem of the driveway, and the old road was sitting there that no one was using, so why not abandon it? Our fear would be that if you retain a drainage easement over the whole 62-foot section, would he be faced one day with a problem that the county would say, you need to get that driveway out of the way, we need to make something else here. What I'm asking you is, if you've already solved the drainage problem that you think exists out there with the drain to the north half of this, we'd like to have this abandoned without a retention for that easement.
Of drainage only.
I'll give up the one on power. So then you're not agreeing with what staff wants? Well, I'm asking this, the only reason I'm asking at the 11th hour, I thought this was done. I did not see I was not sent the program for today. I didn't see the recommendation. So, and when Worth told me about it last night, I said, well, I'll just come and ask. I mean, so I'll just come and ask, that's all. He's happy to have it released. That's what he wants. But if you can ask Public Works to rethink that part of it, we'll take it any way we can get it. But if we can get it better, that is to remove that part that would represent a drainage easement over the half that he...
Can we limit the drainage easement, Stan, to what it now occupies?
Right. We'll let the Public Works Director speak to that. From a planning standpoint, I think what's being requested is from the northern edge of the driveway south to have retain a utility easement only there, and then to have utility and drainage easement north of the northern edge of the driveway.
Okay.
And I think we want to make sure that was okay with Public Works for that, but we wouldn't see a problem.
There he is.
Jim Davis, Public Works Director. it's a matter of course that we request the drainage easement over the entire right-of-way to be abandoned for a couple of reasons. One is access to the ditch if we have to get a truck or a piece of equipment alongside the existing swale or ditch to work on it. At least we have the right to utilize it then. We don't have any plans really to remove the drive, although, we would probably prefer just to have the easement over the entire thing for access. Now, there is a backlot ditch to the north to some degree. It's not a real definitive ditch. Mr. Goldsmith lives to the east, and there has been quite a lot of communication back and forth about this drainage going from east to west and down 32nd Avenue. But that seems to be resolved, and it's best to just leave it as it is, I assume. But it's just a matter of course that whenever we abandon a right-of-way, if we have any indication we may need it for drainage, we just request an easement over the entire thing. And I really don't think there's any plans, to remove the driveway.
Okay. And you would probably, if something did happen in there, you could probably work around the driveway.
Sure, we would certainly do that.
Would that be would you have a problem with that if we made that a caveat, that obviously if the driveway had the...
Right, my only concern was preserving the driveway,
Right.
so I have access to the house.
And your house locates to the north, not to the west.
South.
South.
The house is in
South to the south.
point 3 there, and the driveway's in the black part, and the house is, you just pull right up, and the house is right on the property.
Right, no, but your driveway, your driveway's on the north side of the house facing north.
Correct, yeah, right, sorry.
Okay. All right. Anyone else from the public? I'll close the public hearing. What's your
Move
pleasure?
staff recommendation with a caveat of adding the fact that we know that if we have to get into his driveway, that we work with him.
Yeah, I mean, that's...
Do we have a second?
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Public discussion items. Request to speak from Mark Brackett regarding interpretation of a vote for the PD approval on Blue Water Bay. Please give your name and address and then give your remarks, limiting your remarks to 3 minutes unless additional time is granted by the commission.
Thank you very much, Mark Brackett, 1915 34th Avenue. I'll speak quickly. I had a PD.
Wait a minute, Mark, can you read that again? What do we...
I just read that. That was on there.
So we're now under a 3-minute time limit?
No, I don't know. Somebody put that on there.
Is my clock running?
No, we're not under the 3-minute time limit. I was just asking you.
How'd that get in there? Was that from former Commissioner Ginn?
You mean, how'd Mark get on there?
Mr. Brackett, go ahead.
Mark
Ignore
Brackett,
these guys.
Mark Brackett, 1915 34th Avenue. I had a PD application before the Board of County Commissioners back in February of 2005 for the Blue Water Bay project. The PD was approved with some conditions. One of the conditions listed on the PD approval was condition 2F, which reads, convey or have conveyed to the county all off-site right-of-way necessary to construct the required 89th Street improvements. 89th Street, just to refresh your memory, 89th Street is a street that borders my project on one side, wraps around, has 3 neighbors on the other side of the street, so it requires the cooperation of 4 different property owners to build this road. This road is not a county road or a platted road or was a planned road. It's a road that the planning staff thought would be beneficial to the county based on the timing of 4 different properties coming in for development at relatively the same time. My question here is the interpretation of 2F. I interpret that to mean that the dedication of all the right-of-way in my control or at my disposal and associated with the property that I submitted, the Blue Water Bay parcel. I'll paraphrase, I think, staff's interpretation that and their interpretation is right in as they wrote it, is that it requires the dedication of right-of-way from all 4 parcels, my parcel and the 3 that I don't control. My question is, how did the board interpret 2F when they voted on it? And it's a big issue because, like I said, if the interpretation is that it does require the dedication of right-of-way from 4 different parcels, 3 of which I don't own,
That-
Do you have a map of this series
It's a major problem.
we're looking at? Okay. You don't need to do that now, Wesley, it's on there.
Let him draw. Let him keep drawing.
Give him his crayons.
I'll just point out a couple of things on the map. This Blue Water Bay, by the way, this is 510, coming west and then north, as it turns up and goes toward 512. Blue Water Bay is the project here. You may recall the right-of-way negotiation. I think they got development agreement approved recently for the right-of-way here at the corner. This is Sebastian Park PD, which also has conditions tied to 89th Street as well as 86th Avenue being improved. Both projects have access off of 86th Avenue, and Blue Water also has an access point approved off of 89th Street. And Mark is correct. This was a lot like the South County Initiative. When these projects came through, there was discussion about joint access and joint right-of-way dedications, and this circulation system was worked out, and that was what was presented to the board back in February of 2005, and that's the wording of the condition that was in the report and in the motion, that off-site right-of-way was required because that was the way that this was designed. In other words, there could have been a design at the time to have all the right-of-way come off of Blue Water Bay to do 89th Street. But there was a recognition and I think cooperation, and I think still cooperation from the property owner here, Spencer. I think the sticking point's been the Hess property here. Maybe wasn't a sticking point back when going through all the process, but is now. So I think there's some options, redesign options that could be pursued, but that would require coming back through the PD process. I mean, that's staff's position, that we have a very clear condition. 89th Street was part of the package. In fact, it's the design that's approved right now needs 89th Street, and to differ from that, there is a process to go through, the PD process to get the condition changed or to change the design. But I think what Mark is asking this morning is do you all read the condition any differently than I think the way it plainly reads?
And I think, with all due respect, Stan, you're going a lot farther than I think I'm requesting here today. I'm not requesting the abandonment to build 89th Street or to get rid of that construction at all. I'm asking that the county commissioners look back at what they voted on, and what I think was voted on, or at least I think you may think what was voted on, was a requirement of me to dedicate the right-of-way that I had control over. If you go further in my PD approval to the last item, it requires that actual construction of that road be done before I get to house number 190, which would be, assuming we got started tomorrow, might be 3 or 4 years down the road. So,
what do you see this is saying, convey or have conveyed also for 89th Street?
I have right-of-way that's necessary.
Can you point at it over there and tell us what you think?
Dan knows what I think, if you want to.
Half of the right-of-way?
Half of the right-of-way on my north side, 30 feet, half of my right-of-way on the east side, which I have dedicated.
I can't read the other part of your mind, Mark, which is where the off-site part comes in. I'm not sure when you read this, what would be off your site that you'd have to dedicate, or have dedicated, have conveyed.
I'm not sure. I think that was the question. I don't think you need to read my mind. I'll go back, and my point when I discussed it with you in the past was, I don't know of another instance where the county commission has required a property owner to dedicate right-of-way that wasn't in his control. I just think it reeks of unfairness.
It says convey or have conveyed the off-site right-of-way. And again, the option at the time of the design was it could all come from your property, or you could split the right-of-way dedication. And I think that's still an option today. And the reason why the condition is timed the way that it is before Mark goes forward and puts in all the infrastructure, the subdivision improvements for the project, without knowing where that 89th Street right-of-way is going to be. would kind of get him into a bind, and if in fact something didn't work out. That's why the timing is important. What we've talked to Mark about doing is to dedicate a 60-foot width, because it's basically a local roadway, 2-lane road, across the northern part of his property to get the land development permit now. He could come back in and do a redesign, or maybe come to terms with another property owner and kind of preserve that option. So that's really where we are right now, and making sure we enforce and have right-of-way in place so that the improvement can be done, and allow Mark time to come back in with a design change. That's the way that we see it.
You would like him to dedicate his 30 feet and then talk to the adjoining people and have them dedicate their 30 feet.
That's what.
Well, I mean, that's
what we're saying here.
That's what the way the condition is written. Mark does not get his land development permit to design the project the way it's approved, with only 30 feet coming from his property for 89 feet.
That's all. The word clearly says all right away.
Well, he wrote this, though. You wrote this letter.
No, sir. I don't know what you're holding there. I'm sorry.
Wrote a biddle.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Mark, I passed out the approval letter.
Stan wrote that letter.
I'm sorry, I haven't looked at that.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
First, there may be a legal question here on F, as how a court or how an attorney would interpret that. But what I understand from this, I think there's two issues here. I'd like to get the other one before we leave. But I can tell you, when I looked at this, and I'm not a lawyer, so I don't go word for word and try to interpret each phrase and sentence, etc. But when we looked at these developments, assuming all that property is going to be developed and they were taking half of the right-of-way from each property, that was my understanding. Whether it's legally correct or not, I cannot answer that. But and the question Mark's asking is, what did we interpret? And I interpreted that half the right-of-way would come from each property owner. And also, if this continues, that one portion up there, which I understand there's some friction between them and the county, and so there's some anger from some of the people that own that other piece of property, is what I'm hearing. That piece of property will be developed someday, and the right-of-way can be donated and made to be donated at that time or sold. And if the road has to be built before the property is dedicated, the county has a right, just like in any other instance, to use eminent domain to take that 30 feet to build the road. And that's my comments on this portion. And then before we leave this, I'd like to come back to this again.
Well, keep going.
Well, it's a separate issue, but that's I just wonder where this, please give the name and address, and then your remarks, limiting remarks to 3 minutes unless additional time is granted by the commission. The chairman of this commission last year and this commission agreed not to have a 3-minute rule. And I wonder who changed that.
I did.
Said, oh, you did?
I did.
Okay.
I think what that gave him was the opportunity, in the event that he needed to rein in some of the public comment on specific issues, he had it in his bylaws.
You can do that anyway.
He can do that as chairman anyway.
This was a note to the people who were making their presentations, so they would be aware that the rule, the law, as we now have it, says 3 minutes. It's not been enforced, and it's worked well. Tom started it last year, and it worked well. I'm not enforcing it.
Okay, and that was my concern, because this I think this sends a message to the public that is not receptive to public input from the commission. In fact, we kind of sound like the city. They get in more debate over whether they're going to extend it 2 minutes or not than the 2 minutes would take if they extended it.
I'd like to see you, Mr. Chairman, run it how you've been running it without the verbiage up there. You've been doing a good job, in my opinion.
Thank you.
Takes 3 votes.
Now, where were we? We were talking about some other issues.
Well, I'll interject this, that I think it's going to be a non-issue in 6 to 8 months. Again, if you look at my final requirement, it says that I don't have to actually pave the road or put this road in, and I'm doing it in conjunction with neighboring developments, till my 190th lot, and I'm going to estimate that to be 3 or 4 years. The property owner that's giving us some angst is in a beef with the county, and I think the county has handled her situation entirely appropriately. I think, that property owner has made some mistakes in their application process and has caused herself some problems. But I think they're now approaching the finish line, are in for a rezoning. They're asking for something that's compatible with what we're all doing, and if that runs the likely course, she has said, when I get to that finish line, near the end of this year, I will be willing to dedicate the right-of-way at that time. I'm just saying, staff is asking me to jump through a lot of hoops and take a lot of time, spend a lot of money on gyrations I don't think are necessary and I don't think are consistent with what the commission thought it was voting on.
I think, Mr. Chairman, I agree with Commissioner Wheeler, and I think this is a situation that I think warrants this whole North County initiative, as you call it, to jump on the bandwagon when Blue Water Bay had come forward with this street. So I do agree with Gary on that.
Well, happy birthday.
Amazing what a year makes.
Mr. Chairman, I agree with Mr. Wheeler's comments also, as far as we cannot make Mr. Brackett go and get property that a willing seller does not want to give him. We would have to use our power of eminent domain in order to get property that a willing seller is not able to, or does not want to convey. We'd have to do a taking.
And I did offer to fund that taking if the county undertook it.
And if I could just say, Will Collins indicated that he didn't think we could prove necessity in a takings case because there was the opportunity to get the entire amount of right-of-way off from the Blue Water Bay property.
Yes.
The issue I think that we're dealing with is when we came and recommended approval of this PD, what we're showing is a roadway system with interconnectivity that envisioned and required 89th Street to be there. We all did at that time assume and fully thought that the right-of-way would be split between properties there, but
because it normally is.
Right.
I mean, that's the way that
right, but there is an alternative here, and the alternative is the right-of-way could come all from one piece of property. What we're trying to do at this point, and the reason that the condition requires that the right-of-way be dedicated prior to land development permit is, like Stan said, not to get near the end of the process and find that there's not enough right-of-way to accommodate the road that was the basis for the approval.
Which I think is a good idea. My question to staff would be then, if that neighboring property to the north comes in at a later date after Mr. Brackett has dedicated the full 60 feet instead of just 30 feet, that property owner gets a benefit of being a non-team player, perhaps?
We've offered the opportunity that the dedication could take place actually maybe as two instruments. One, the 30 feet that was always intended to be dedicated, and then another 30 feet south of that that could be dedicated with a reverter, that it would go back to Mark if the 30 feet came off the north side.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, that seems psychological.
Mr. Chairman.
But Mark,
that causes problems, though, because if I dedicate the additional 30 feet with the reverter, which sounds like an easy solution, the next question comes from engineering. You've dedicated 30 feet off of lots that you're now trying to get a LDP for.
And you've changed it as bad as no 30 feet to the north on the, I mean, you've got a condition of development with the developer's agreement on the 30 feet from both property owners. Then you've got a condition of the development with the buffers and such as that on the north side that we're affecting quite possibly with an easement for a road. It's kind of like, which one are we going to violate?
I like the drawing, too, that Stan put up there, because that is the drawing, I believe, that came up during the PD approval. And if you'll notice, 89th Street, as it intersects 510 on the north, curves to the north and crosses, impacting the Lakeview Estates Spencer development piece. In fact, that's not where it's going to be. You can flip that to the south, and it impacts my property. And I didn't take the position when that change was notified to me. That's not what the commission voted on. You need to run it up the north. You don't need to take my property. We didn't do that. We redesigned. We lost lots and incurred cost because the county wanted it in a different place than where it was voted on.
Actually, both alternatives were discussed and presented at the PD here.
The two alternatives that are up there, but the alternative that the county has settled on is a third alternative that is not shown and was never discussed. Entirely on my site.
Can I just make one comment? Staff cannot waive this even if they wanted to, because it's real simple. When you read it, it's convey or have conveyed to the county all off-site right-of-way necessary to construct the required 89th Street improvements, and we thought you wanted the connectivity. Also, you know, when you might think, well, that person down there the Hesses are going to do something. If the economy turns around or something happens, there's no guarantee. So first thing is staff doesn't have the option of discretion. Second of all, they had their professional help working on it when they agreed to these conditions. And you may not, and we're just trying to help the commission, you may not get your connectivity if you don't approve it. And we're just, that's the situation as it stands.
With all due respect, I'm not asking for a waiver. I'm asking for the commission to interpret what they voted on, to give me the interpretation of what they voted on. And I'm not required to build that road until the 190th home. I think there's still time. And in theory, Mr. Baird, I could get to 189 homes, stop, and I'm not ever required to build that road.
Mark, I take it your idea of the meeting of the minds in this contract was I give 30 feet and the other property owner gives 30 feet.
I give 30
is that
feet,
fair
and
of staff also?
Well, that and the fact that Mark, and I think this is true, I mean, we verified this. I mean, Mark spoke with the other property owners, and, you know, back then, everybody was in agreement. And so, and that drove the design. There was another design option to have it all on Blue Water Bay, but it seemed fair to do it that way. What's changed is one of the owners is no longer willing. But again, staff's concern is that besides having to follow the condition that the board did at a public hearing when we weigh trade-offs, is letting Mark build the subdivision based on a design that might not work. His connection to 89th Street is in the Hess property area here. You know, is he going to build himself into a corner with an entrance that goes to a street that's not going to be put in? These are design issues, and again, the arrangement was made the way it was made. But the design was approved with these things having to be done, and the process to go through, I think, is through the PD process to look at a new design.
I think it's entirely appropriate for me to ask for an interpretation from what the commission voted on. I think that the words aren't necessarily, like you said, Commissioner Wheeler, about being an attorney and reviewing the meaning of every word, because if you look at number 2H, enter into a contract with the county for the purchase of lots, blah, blah, blah. We understand that had multiple interpretations. We had a differing. We settled on what was appropriate interpretation, what the county interpreted that, the commission who voted on it, and we went with that. So I'm just asking for, again, the county commission to interpret what they voted on.
I see two sides of this argument. I think probably the intent of staff and everybody else when this document was drawn up and the Hess property was a part of this scenario and everything else, nobody saw any problems, and it was going to move forward. Well, then when the Hess property pulled out, it kind of put us down to now crossing T's and dotting I's and reading it in detail. Secondly, show the whole project for me, will you, Stan? I want to see whether ingress and egress is in that subdivision.
There's one to the south and one to the east.
Yeah, there's one, okay, and that's, if the Hess property doesn't develop, then what you said is true with the northern ingress egress, but without the Hess property development, there's really not a big need for that other section of road.
I think what you have essentially 400 units with one access point, and that would not meet what we apply in terms of emergency services or secondary access, even on a conventional subdivision.
Don't you have access to 510?
510? No.
Yeah.
You could design access to 510.
Yeah, but I think this, of course, logically, who knows what the future holds, but I think this problem is going to take care of itself, because I think the Hess property is going to develop, and
Well, to answer Mark's question, I think we all agree from what I'm hearing here, is that's how it's supposed to work, and it looked like at the beginning it was.
Right.
It would, but now it doesn't. So we haven't changed our mind. We're still saying what we thought we wanted to see.
Which was half come from each?
Half come from each.
So I guess the question that we have now is, do we hold Mark hostage for somebody else's actions whenever it's out of his control?
No, I think. Or does our intent mean something, or the letter on the paper? I don't know. That's a legal question. But I know certainly when I look at this and other plans, I kind of try to look at it logically, a little common sense, and I don't go through each word and each sentence and and pick it all apart. That's what staff does, that's what our legal staff does, and you assume that it's...
But Mark says that the property to the north will come online.
Well, I think if you look at what's happened historically to date in dealing with them, they say they're coming online, they're coming in front of you. I can't, predict with
Well, and I think it's of note that it's also already has been...
He's got 200 houses to build before it's going to affect.
Right, and you know what, if we get to 100, 3-4 years, if we get to 185 and Hess doesn't come on
doesn't
board...
resolve by itself, then whoever's sitting here then will have to decide eminent domain and take that out of 30 feet.
Okay.
These roads are going to be dedicated to the county after they're completed, aren't they?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we.
Do you need an official vote on that, or what?
Well, I think the question that Mark posed was, what did the commission mean when it voted to require 2F as far as the right-of-way dedication?
Well, just like I just said.
I agree. I agree with Mr. Baird's comments as far as the word "all" in there, but I also find the word "off-site" to be informative and instructive also. That implies that there was property off his site that he had no control over, and that was contemplated in the contribution. So I think the commission thought 30 feet from each.
That's what this commissioner thought.
That's what this commissioner thought, too.
Okay.
Who didn't vote? It's a 4-0 vote. Who wasn't here?
Who wasn't here for that meeting?
Was it me? I remember.
Sandra voted for it.
Is that a senior moment?
Absolutely. I just don't want one of you to be speaking and you weren't here.
I've only missed one.
Well, to date, I've never missed a meeting.
We'll work on that.
Well, considering I have dedicated my 30 feet, I'm just asking for reiteration that I have met that requirement of 2F.
We also have the lots, or an agreement on the lots on the corner of
Already done.
That was, and it's not $300,000 an acre?
We approved that a while ago.
Last county commission meeting, I believe.
Let's not bring that in.
So you've done due diligence to the best of your ability. So I think we ought to permit you to move ahead.
Thank you.
That need to be made in the form of a motion?
Yes.
I move we let him move ahead.
Second.
Oh, well, I'm going to go with staff.
You weren't here.
Well, you don't know that.
You weren't here.
All right, we have a motion to let him move ahead and provide all the right-of-way he's able to provide, with the hopes that the other one will come online within the next 2 or 3 years. But I don't know.
They've already have been rejected for annexation in the city of Sebastian to the north.
Have they?
Yes, and so therefore we are their next obvious route.
Okay.
And
Under discussions, Stan or Bob, do you think that we would need to come back with a PD amendment in order to clear up some of the language?
I think my understanding of the motion is 2F is to convey all on-site right-of-way necessary. That's what he has control over. We don't know what the deal is going to be with Spencer's property or with Hess's property. If and when Spencer's in the city of Sebastian, so however that works out in terms of getting dedication for 89th Street, we don't know. Hess, we don't know, but we do know that Mark is set soon to get a permit to build a connection to something that we hope will be 89th Street at some point in time.
Maybe that was
I think that'll be the result.
Yeah. Maybe that was a typo, Stan. Instead of off, it should have been on.
It was a repeated typo.
twice on-site.
Mr. Chairman?
Everybody understand the motion? Yes, Gary?
No, we'll go ahead.
All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Motion carried. 4-1.
Okay. The other thing, Mr. Chairman, I request that you remove this.
I'll make a modification to it.
Thank you.
Okay, we're at public notice items. Pam, you want to do that?
Notice of joint meeting with the City of Vero Beach, May 31st, 2006. There will be a joint meeting of the Indian River County Board of County Commission and the City of Vero Beach City Council on May 31st, 2006 at 9 a.m. in the Indian River County Commission Chambers, 1840 25th Street, Vero Beach, Florida. Number 2, notice of scheduled public hearings, items June 6, 2006. Board consideration to approve purchase of the Russell Grove River Buffer Environmental Land Acquisition Project. This matter is administrative. Board consideration to approve purchase of the Shadowbrook Estates, Inc. parcel of the South Prong Slough Environmental Land Acquisition Project. This matter is administrative.
Thank you. Next item is 11I, Public Works right-of-way acquisition, 66th Avenue south of State Road 60 north of 12th Street, Alex G. and Conchetta A. Walters. Someone going to address this? Have a motion?
Yeah, move approval.
I'll second it for, you second it? Under discussion, Jim, the only thing I want to question is, and I noticed that this property is outside the urban service area, but yet we're paying top dollar for it. I think appraisal came in at $61,000, and they're wanting $110,000.
Right, and that's true. Land is going outside the urban service area for a high cost these days. We know what the school board paid for the land outside the urban service area. That was $95,000 or plus or minus. We made an offer, and they counter-offered. So that's what they're claiming their best price is. Now there are some severance damages in here, which are damages to the remainder of the property that we need to make whole as a part of taking the property. So it's not just raw land values that are an issue here.
I know in the past I've been stung before by not accepting what staff wanted, and it came back, and I think that lot ended up being $30,000 or $40,000 more. So I've learned my lesson. I accept that.
Do you have a motion and a second?
Yes.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. 11I2, work order number 6, Carter and Associates, Inc. for Indian River County Hobart Park Maintenance Complex Project, professional surveying and mapping services to support design needs, project number 0623.
Move approval.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. 11J1, Utility Services, Utilities Department Operations Center, approval of change order number 6 for various changes, Indian River County project number UCP 2229.
Move approval.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. 11J2, 8-inch master plan force main on 1st Street Southwest from 43rd Avenue to 27th Avenue.
Move approval. Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. 11J3, work order number 2 with Schulke, Biddle, and Stoddard LLC for construction of upgrades to Bent Pine lift stations, UCP number 2806.
Move approval.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. County Attorney, request for authorization to staff to call letter of credit, subdivision Oak Hollow Estates, developer Deleco Development LLC, DeRocco Construction Company, Inc., manager, member.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're asking the Commission to give us the authority to call the letter of credit outstanding on this matter. You might recall that it was extended once back in December of 2005. Staff recommends against another extension of the letter of credit because there are houses that are close to being finished. We don't want to get into the problem that we had with the lakes at Sandridge, where there were people that were ready to move into the house, ready to close, and the certificate of completion had not been issued. It's my understanding in speaking with the developer that the only thing outstanding is a recording of a revised drainage deed, and they should be ready to get their certificate of completion.
So if they complete these by the 31st?
That's correct. We will not call the letter of credit.
I'll second that, Mr. Chairman.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Commissioner items. Commissioner Newberger has nothing. Commissioner Wheeler?
Yeah, I was going to put this on in June, but due to some urgency, if we were going to do anything, I passed out before the meeting a little synopsis here. What I'm suggesting, I go back and I looked at August of 2004 and August of 2005, and in fact, 3 meetings in 2004 and 4 meetings in August of 2005. We had a total of about 5 hours and 53 minutes to run 4 meetings. And I would like to give direction to staff to look at this and see if it's feasible to perhaps have 1 meeting in August toward the end of the month and get input from my fellow commissioners, and also to give direction to staff. Take a look at this, give us an idea whether it's a good or a bad idea, and also advanced notice to the public. August is a very slow month based on the last couple of years. We're through budgets, through the LDRs, we're comp plan, et cetera. So, and it would also give staff, I think, some free time to get caught up, ready to go into the new year, fiscal year, and hurricane season if we have hurricanes. I know a lot of staff are continuing to build vacations, and I think it just frees up some time in August where people can spend time with family and so on and so forth.
Those were short meetings in August, July and August 2005, 2004. Is that what it was?
Yeah, well, 2005, we had a total of 5 hours and 53 minutes dedicated to all 4 meetings. 2 of them went a little over half an hour, and then 2 of them, one went 3 hours, one went an hour. But if staff thinks they could do this and pick a date, the 22nd or something like that in August, if that would work.
You talking about skipping the whole month?
Having 1 meeting that month.
Which one?
Well, I was talking to Mr. Baird. We're looking at the 15th or the 22nd, somewhere in there.
Of August?
Of August.
Looking at the minutes back in August, Joe, and those 2 short or 1 short, were any of those emergency meetings we had for? No, we didn't have any hurricanes last year, the year before.
Yeah, we did have that one very short one.
Yeah.
We could try that, see how it works.
I'd like to hear staff's recommendation.
Yeah, staff, we have very busy June and July, between the all the LDRs for planning and the budget hearings, a lot of workshops and night meetings. And usually staff that has family can't get, especially the higher staff, we don't allow vacations while working on the budget. So August, they all try and get out. We usually are working with a skeleton staff in the first couple of weeks of June anyway. That's why you don't see many agenda items, because everyone's trying to utilize their vacation with their families before school goes back into session. So we wouldn't have a problem. We think we may need 1 meeting in August, but other than that, we've discussed it, and majority of my department heads are gone the first couple of weeks in August, so they just end up, they use their summer vacation then. Mainly because of like I said, the budget process is June and July very heavy, and also the planning staff with LDR changes in July.
So you still say not to meet the last Tuesday in July and then come back?
Right. It would stay the same, and then because we're done with budget then, and that kind of kills it. And then I like the 22nd of August, for instance, which would give us a couple of weeks before the September meeting, if there's any catch-up, so we don't have a 10-hour meeting.
There won't be a July
17th, I think, or 18th is the last meeting.
Okay.
We end up with our budget hearings, some week during, was that scheduled yet, Joe?
There's 3 Tuesdays in July.
Yeah.
July 18th is a meeting.
We will not meet the last Tuesday in July, nor the first and second Tuesdays in August.
Or third.
We will meet the third.
Yeah, well, I guess, the third. The third would be the 22nd, I believe.
There's 5.
No, the 4th would be the 22nd.
It would be the third, we'd meet the...
The 4th is the 22nd.
I think if staff could pick that, if we wanted to, we could approve it, let staff pick it, notify everybody, because either week's fine with me.
Yeah.
I guess, and Joe, I don't know if you've had the opportunity to run this by staff, but before I make a decision, I'd like to know what projects are coming up. We may have something pressing that utilities needs to do at that time, and if you would, by chance, just get the flavor of the department heads.
We've already started that process.
Okay, but before I make a decision, I'd like to know that.
So just have staff come back next meeting with their recommendation.
Okay.
All right. Anything else, Commissioner?
Thank you.
Commissioner Bowden?
No.
Commissioner Davis?
No, sir.
Commissioner Lowther?
No, sir.
All right. Item number 14A1, Emergency Services District, authorization for final payment and release of retainage to Barth Construction for repair of emergency services
Move
station
approval.
number 8. Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. And number 2, authorization for final payment and release of retainage to Barth Construction, Inc. for the renovation repair of emergency services
approval.
station number 6. Moved and
Seconded.
all in favor, say aye.
Under discussion.
I'm sorry. Under discussion?
Aye.
Just running your mouth. Okay. Any opposed? Motion carries. You ruined the continuity there. I believe we're adjourned.